youngster.
Yeah. We still call it pot vang, but yeah.
Yeah. I started when I was 14. And then they moved me over to Blackburn, and I was there till 2 or 3 years ago before I started for Service Ottawa.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So we should be starting the streaming within the next few minutes.
Sounds good. I started working for the city of Ottawa when I was 16 as well. I worked at what was the Orleans Rec Complex. I was a lifeguard and swim instructor there. Nice. And then moved over to Ray Friel when it was owned by Serco, which was a debacle in and of itself.
Part of my role at the Blackburn Arena was taking care of the pool during the summer as well. So I have a lot of friends that were lifeguards at that outdoor pool.
Nice. Great little pool.
Yeah.
Good morning, Joy. I just wanted to make sure if Elder Albert has joined.
Hi, Natalie. I can barely hear you. Do you want to try that again? And you're still on mute if you're trying.
I'm sorry. I want to make sure if Elder Albert has joined.
So I don't know if you want to try logging in and out again. You're cutting out. I can barely hear what you're saying.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks.
Is this better?
Yes, much better.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure if Elder Albert Dumont had joined.
I believe they have.
Okay.
Just let me double check, okay?
Thank you.
Morning, Kim. Good morning, Caroline.
Good morning, Chair.
How you doing?
100%. Yourself?
Almost there, man. Almost there.
there.
Almost there. Yeah.
I didn't know. I just heard the news yesterday. So hope you're doing okay, bud.
Yeah, much better now. I think it took about 7 days before I started to feel a little better. At the 5-day mark, we're like, oh, okay, good. Our quarantine's over. And I tested myself. I was still positive. So I was like, nope, not going anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's tougher in your situation too, right? How are the kids and your wife?
So the kids fared it far better than the adults did.
Okay.
Frankly, they're resilient, you know? So like Libby had a fever of 39 and was dressed up as Elsa and singing and having a great time, you know? So my youngest, she was pretty badly stuffed up, and you know, when you're 7 months old, you don't really understand why. So it was a little bit tougher. Luckily, you know, she's just got such a sunny disposition that like most of the time she was, you know, quite pleased anyway. But my wife and I got hit the hardest, I'd say. we tried to pass on the antibodies that my wife got from the three injections, through breast milk and that sort of thing. So yeah, they fared very, very well compared to us.
Good.
That's for sure. Yeah,
That's good.
I don't wish it on anyone.
Now you'll have super immunity, so you're good.
I hope so. For 3 months, I hear. Anyway.
Yeah. Perfect.
No, us to talk, to talk.
Good morning.
Good morning, Elder Dumont. How are you?
I'm good. I hope everybody's doing well today.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, it's good to be here.
You're feeling well? You fared well throughout this pandemic? You're doing all right? Still hardy and feeling good?
Yeah. Yes. There was no serious illness in the family. A couple of my grandchildren got COVID, and a couple of my cousins, but nobody was very sick with it, thankfully.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yep. Just recently they caught it.
It seems to be the case.
They're fully vaccinated though.
Good. Yeah, we were just talking, and my family had it last week and the week before. It was no fun, but you get through it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Good morning, Dan.
Good morning, everyone.
Good to see you.
You.
Thank you to everybody joining us on the YouTube stream. We're just waiting for the rest of our committee members to join us. We're at 3 of 6, and we'll begin shortly.
Good morning.
Good morning. Nice to see you. Good morning, Eli.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. Albert, my old friend, how are you?
How you doing, Eli? Good to see
Good,
you.
sir. How are you?
I'm good.
I miss you at the
Long
sugar
time
shack
no see.
in the last few years. We haven't seen you in Kilton.
Mm-hmm. Well, soon as I guess maybe this year or next year for sure, I probably be there for the sugar making up syrup.
Eli, by definition, aren't you everybody's old friend?
Well, because I'm old, so obviously. Keith, from all people you should know, this year is my golden year. I'm going to be almost as old as Dan Chanier.
Welcome, everyone. We'll just give everyone a couple of more minutes to join, and we'll begin shortly. But please feel free to razz Keith in the interim.
Too easy.
Okay, Mr. Clerk, it looks like we've got a quorum. So out of respect for our elders who have joined us today, we will begin the meeting and hope that by the time we get around to roll call, we have a full slate. So good morning and welcome to the Community and Protective Services Committee meeting of March 31st, 2022. We are certainly going out like a lion today, aren't we? I would like to call this meeting to order. Please note that this meeting is also being live streamed on the Ottawa City Council YouTube channel. I'll provide each committee member with the opportunity to ask questions or comment on each item. Committee members will be called on first, following by any other members of council who have joined the meeting. I'm not often very good at that, so if I make a mistake and call on a member of council before you, please do not be insulted. Usually just go by the order of hands that are up. Members are also reminded to submit any motions, visual supports, or declarations of interest in writing to the coordinator at their earliest convenience. When it's your turn to speak, delegations who have joined us will be admitted as panelists into the meeting, allowing them to turn on their microphone and their camera to address the committee. So please accept the prompt to be promoted as a panelist. You'll see the raise hand button at the bottom of the meeting window to identify yourselves. So for those calling in lieu of that, you can press *9 to raise your hand. The committee coordinator and I will be watching for those cues, and the usual 5-minute speaking limit for delegations will apply. Although the deadlines have passed for residents to register to speak at this committee, residents may still make written submissions prior to the council meeting scheduled for April 13th. If you have technical difficulties signing into the meeting, you can contact the city clerk's office at committees@ottawa.ca or by calling 613-580-2424, and the extension is 28934. I'd like to begin our meeting by acknowledging that Ottawa is built on unceded Anishinaabe Algonquin territory. The peoples of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation have lived on this territory for millennia. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. The City of Ottawa honors the people and the land of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation. The City of Ottawa honors all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples, and their valuable past and present contributions to this land. Today, we are joined by two elders of the Anishinaabe Algonquin host nation. Elder Albert Dumont, a member of Kitigan Zibi Anishinabe, is also known as Southwind. He is an Algonquin traditional teacher, an Ottawa poet laureate, a storyteller, and a speaker. We are honored to have you with us today. Elder Ron Bernard is an Anishinaabe Algonquin knowledge keeper. His archaeological knowledge has served the Algonquins of Pikwakanagan First Nation for many years. Elder Ron was also a band council member for many years, and his political experience is of great significance to the Anishinaabe Algonquins. Elders Dumont and Bernard, I turn the floor over to you.
Clay, and good morning, everyone. I'd like to begin by just letting you know that the Anishinaabe Algonquin creation story begins on this territory. We are a people who became known as the people of the Great River. And whenever I say the Great River, I'm speaking about the Ottawa River. The river to us is as much of our identity as human beings as the blood in flowing in our veins. That's how important the river is to us. You know, it was a trade route, and it's good for you to know that nobody entered our territory that didn't respect Algonquin protocols. That's the way it always was. That was the way that made sense, and that still makes sense. The Algonquins, whenever we went into somebody else's territory, we respected their protocols. And it's good for whatever your cultural background is, for people to never forget about honoring the protocols of a host nation. I'd like to, you know, these kind of meetings are important and mean a lot to human beings, you know, to citizens, to people who want to make a better country, a better province, and a better city. So this prayer now is important. It's a prayer from an elder named Bill Twain, who was a Second World War veteran, and this is his beautiful prayer. You know, that's Mr. Twain said that his family line kept this prayer alive for possibly thousands of years, and this is it. I want to say to the good spirit Minu Manado, how grateful we are for everything that Creator placed in our homelands that help human beings to live well. We acknowledge and honor every tree, river, lake, and stream. Acknowledge and honor every bird, animal, fish, and all the good human beings. We're grateful for all those things in the sky world and all those things that live beneath the surface of the earth. We're grateful too for the bees and all the other insects that help the plants to grow. We're grateful for our medicines and for our ceremonies. We're grateful for our ability to prepare ourselves spiritually for that spirit world that will begin when the short physical life ends. We're grateful for our ability to bring peace and comfort to one another during times of troubles and in times of anguish. We ask you now, good spirit, to fill the space that we're in with your blessings and to touch each of us with the wisdom of our Anishinaabe ancestors. We ask that there will be good words spoken here today, strong words that will impact all of us emotionally and spiritually. We ask that if there's anyone who's listening to this prayer who has a relative or a friend who's suffering somehow, whether from addiction things or depression or some kind of physical sickness, we ask that that relative or friend will have a good day today and that they will return soon to the family as a role model and as a mentor. We ask these things of you, good spirit, because of the great respect we have for everything that Creator has made. Miigwech, I know we're going to have a good meeting.
Elder Bernard?
Can you hear me?
We can, sir.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ron Bernard. I'm a member of the Algonquins of Pikwakanagan First Nation, and I'm a retired member of Pikwakanagan First Nation Council. I've served 20 years on that council, and today I'd like to provide welcome to the panelists to the Algonquin First Nation territory. And just like to say that I think this is a great move forward toward the development of the civic cultural protocol for communications and cultural partnership with the City of Ottawa. So, miigwech.
Miigwech. Today we've received no regrets. And so will the committee coordinator please call the roll?
My pleasure, Councillor. Councillor Deans.
Here.
Councillor Dudas.
Here.
Councillor El Shantiri.
Here.
Conseiller Fleury.
Bonjour.
Councillor Kavanaugh.
Here.
Councillor Kitts.
Here.
Councillor McKenney.
Present.
Councillor Meehan.
Here.
Councillor Tierney.
Present.
Vice Chair Eagle.
Here.
And Chair Luloff.
I am present. Thank you very much, Joey. Certainly appreciate it. And thank you again so much, Elders Dumont and Bernard, for joining us today, for your blessing and for your inspiring words. Je vous remercie de vous nous joindre aujourd'hui. Today, we mark a significant milestone in the city's journey to reconciliation. The committee will consider the City of Ottawa, Anishinabe, Algonquin Civic Cultural Protocol. This protocol has been developed since 2016 in full collaboration with host nation chiefs, elders, representatives, and community members. It frames the relationship between the City of Ottawa and the Anishinaabe Algonquin host nation and will be a guide to our partnerships and shared action in the areas of arts, heritage, and culture. We'll hear more about this civic cultural protocol from Dan Chenier, General Manager of Recreation, Cultural, and Facility Services, Natalie Zuniga, our Indigenous cultural developer, and host nation representatives shortly. I'd like to take a moment first to note that the protocol is a key action within the city's Reconciliation Action Plan, which Council approved in February 2018 as a response to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action. Le protocole est un élément clé du plan d'action pour la réconciliation de la ville que le Conseil a approuvé en février 2018 en réponse aux appels à l'action de la Commission de vérité et réconciliation. The city has made progress on all of the action items from the Reconciliation Action Plan, and many have been completed, including the flags of Algonquin Anishinabe Nation Tribal Council, Algonquins of Pikwakanagan First Nation, were permanently installed in council chambers in Marion Dewar Plaza at City Hall and the mayor's office. The public art team has adapted their process for acquiring art by making it easier for Indigenous artists to apply and to have their art considered for purchase. Children's Services has leveraged provincial funding to support a licensed Indigenous-led childcare center, child and family programs, and funding for the Early Indigenous Years Circle. The city also took on many new actions, including council approving the renaming of Lajva Avenue and Prince of Wales Bridge after the late Algonquin elder William Commanda. The city installed Algonquin wayfinding wheels by an Algonquin artist at all LRT stations and City Hall. As part of LRT Stage 2, Baseline Station will be renamed Algonquin, and the Dominion Station will be renamed Kichizibi, based on the Algonquin name for the Ottawa River. And near and dear to my heart, obviously, is the Ottawa Public Library and National Archives Joint Facility project was named Adisoke, a gift from the host nation, which refers to the telling of stories. The name was provided by elders and members of the Kitigan-Zibi Anishinabe and the Algonquins of Pikwakanagan First Nation. That is an ongoing partnership and one that continues to blossom. La ville a créé un nouveau poste pour diriger l'intervention dans la réconciliation et raffermir la relation de la ville avec les Premières Nations et les communautés inuites et métisses locales. And the first person to take on that new role has joined us today. I am honored to welcome the city's new program manager for Indigenous Relations, Lindsay Kirby McGregor, who joined the Community and Social Services Department team on March 1st. Welcome. It is very nice to have you with us. Thank you so much for the work that you've undertaken and the work that you will continue to do. Lindsay is a member of Whitefish River First Nation, raised in the Ottawa area. She's worked with many Indigenous organizations and their partners across Ottawa and has also lived and worked in Nunavik, Quebec. In her previous roles with the Minwashin Lodge as an Indigenous program manager at Willis College, she supported and created programs to support Indigenous women as they transition to careers in metropolitan communities like Ottawa. In her more recent work with the emergency management team at Calian, Lindsay contributed to many training, planning, and review projects with First Nations and tribal councils, municipal, provincial, and federal governments, and multi-jurisdictional stakeholders, as well as businesses. Lindsay is an experienced technical writer, educator, program planner, evaluator, and manager who holds a Master of Education from the University of Ottawa and a Bachelor of Social Work with an Indigenous specialization from the University of Victoria. She's contributed to the development and evaluation of several Indigenous programs and hopes this lens will help contribute to planning that meets the needs of Indigenous communities. Lindsay's a board member of the Indigenous Arts Collective of Canada, which organized the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation's event, Remember Me, on Parliament Hill on September 30th, 2021. Elle est également membre du Comité d'éducation autochtone du Conseil des écoles catholiques de Centre-Est. And she brings to this new role a thorough understanding of the complexities involved in setting strategic direction for a city looking to develop collaborative relationships with Indigenous peoples. Nous sommes honorés que Lindsay se joigne à l'équipe de la ville d'Ottawa. Welcome and thank you for joining. We now have one more thing before we move on to business. We have an annual report from the Accessibility Advisory Committee on our agenda today, covering their work in 2019 and 2020. As council liaison for that committee, I'd want to highlight the enormous amount of work that the members do throughout the year to ensure that the city's programs, facilities, and services remain accessible to all residents of Ottawa. And I personally believe that public space is not truly public unless it is accessible to all. In 2019, the AAC held 4 regular meetings and 1 special meeting in addition to reviewing 68 site plans and providing feedback on over 40 projects and initiatives. 2020 was a challenging year for everyone, and the AAC rose to that challenge to continue its work. In 2020, 6 of the AAC's 7 meetings were held virtually due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Ottawa was among the first cities in Ontario to host an AAC meeting online, and information on our success was shared with the other cities to encourage them to host virtual meetings as well. Virtual meetings in 2020 were supported with captioning in English and French and American Sign Language based on requests from members, and they offered other supports upon request. In 2020, the AAC reviewed 63 site plans ensuring that accessibility continues to be part of the development planning process. It also provided feedback on 35 city projects, including the electric kick scooter pilot, Stage 2 light rail transit, the Bank Street Canal Bridge, the Ottawa Public Library Universal Design, the draft operating and capital budgets, outdoor play spaces, winter maintenance standards, paratranspo service, the 2020 to 2024 Ottawa Municipal Accessibility Plan, and so much more. Je tiens à souligner le travail acharné et les nombreuses relations de ce précieux groupe de bénévoles. And in English, I want to highlight the hard work and many achievements of this valuable volunteer group. Their knowledge and expertise helps the city maintain its commitment to provide equal treatment to people with disabilities who use and benefit from city services, programs, goods, facilities, and information. So thank you to our chair, Philip, and our vice chair, Brian, and everyone else that sat on this committee over the course of this term. We've had some changeovers. We will consider 3 new members today as well. Thank you so much for the incredible work that you do in our city. So we'll move on to today's full agenda. Passons maintenant à l'ordre du jour d'aujourd'hui. Do we have any declarations of interest We've received none so far, seeing none. Confirmation of minutes. Are the minutes for the meeting of November, which seems like a year ago, 18th, 2021 confirmed?
Confirmed, carried.
Confirmed.
Thank you. Communications, responses to inquiries, CPS 01-20, plastic water bottles, and OCC 22-03, the impact of the truck convoys occupation on the city's residents and businesses. It is my understanding that the staff is withdrawing the current version of the response to Councillor Fleury's inquiry and would be issuing a revised response with the view to better capture the member's question. GM Ayot, do you confirm?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
That said, the revised response would be issued in due course and listed at a future committee council agenda. I thank the councillor for raising this with me and the willingness of the GM to work with the councillor to provide a response that satisfies the questions. Thank you. Item number 1, Recreation, Cultural and Facilities Services Department. This is the City of Ottawa, Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation Civic Cultural Protocol and Implementation Plan 2022 to 2026. I will now turn this over for a presentation from Dan Chenier, and who will introduce our co-presenters who will briefly present the engagement process and collaboration with the Anishinaabe Algonquin host nation.
Thank you, Chair. And Joey, if I could have the presentation up, that would be great. Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see everyone. Bonjour à tous, Kwei. We're honored and delighted to be here today to present the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation Civic Cultural Protocol and its 5-year implementation plan. And I emphasize that because that is really the plan that is going to demonstrate our commitment to the protocol through some concrete actions in 19 areas of cultural work. This protocol is the culmination of several years of dedicated commitment to developing a strong partnership with host nation partners, and is intended really to frame the relationship between the city and the Anishinaabe Algonquin host nation on cultural matters and provide a guide and interaction, partnership development, and shared actions in areas of arts, heritage, and culture. Of course, we are hoping that it lays the groundwork for collaboration in many more areas, but this particular protocol is focused on culture. Next slide, please, Joey. And I've lost my screen. Okay, there we go.
Just one moment, Dan.
Oh,
it won't be long.
Perfect.
I'd also like to recognize that Chief Linda Robinson has joined us as well as Chief Dylan White Duck. Thank you very much for joining us today.
The slide you see in front of you identifies the key Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation partners that have worked with the city for several years now and participated in the development of the documents that we're presenting today. Cette diapositive identifie les partenaires clés dans le développement du protocole. And they include the Algonquin Anishinaabe National Tribal Council, the Algonquin Nation Programs and Services Secretariat, the Algonquins of Piknaktugan First Nation, and the Kitikizanzibi First Nation. We're very honored today to have with us, and the chair has already mentioned a few of the participants, but these have been key partners, and we're delighted that they're able to be here with us today. Acting Grand Chief Savannah McGregor from Algonquin's Anishinaabe Nation Tribal Council, Grand Chief Lisa Robinson from Algonquin Nation Programs and Services Secretariat, Chief Dylan White Duck, Kitikizanzibi Anishinabe First Nation, and Councillor Dan Kohoko, Algonquin Piknaktugan First Nation and Project Lead. And of course, joining me today is from staff is Natalie Zuninga. Natalie has been our lead on this project. Natalie works with, many of you will know, Nicole Zuger and Kathy Shepard-Tiki, who are also key leads on this file and have over the years really made this partnership possible and represented the city so well in terms of our work with the host partners. Next slide, please, Joy. What you're seeing on this slide is a cover of the renewed action plan for arts, heritage, and culture. And we're showing you this because in 2010, City Council approved this document, and it was 2 years in the making. And one of the critical pieces of this document was a statement to honor and recognize Aboriginal, First Nation, Inuit, and Métis culture, and recognize Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation as the Indigenous community in Ottawa by developing a civic protocol, communication, and cultural partnership opportunities. So this is really kind of the foundational document that got us launched in this direction, and that has brought us to today. Next slide, please, Joey. The chair has already mentioned that several of the initiatives that have been undertaken, and as this project moved along and consultation developed into some concrete ideas, our staff and the partners were quick to seize upon those and where possible implement whatever we could in a timely way. And so already, and the chair has mentioned some of these, commemorative artwork at City Hall, Marion Dewar Plaza, the flags on the plaza and in the chambers, the honoring statement that was developed that we have now shared with several other agencies, the Ottawa Public Library, with Ottawa Public Health, and others, to spread the word and essentially share with them the good work that we've done. Next slide, please. A key piece of the work that we've done over the last few years has been not only to do work here in Ottawa, but also to undertake visits, and the slide shows here staff visits to both Piknaquagan and the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation Tribal Council, and this has been an invaluable piece of the learning experience and the sharing experience, and really helped deepen our understanding of what this protocol needed to be and what some of the actions needed to touch on. Next slide, please. And even though recreation, culture, and facilities as a department were involved in our cultural unit, where we reached out to several parts of the city and partners, and some of them are listed here: archives, the Office of Protocol, the library, in order to make it a comprehensive approach to what we are doing. And that has, as you will see when you look at the implementation plan, there is a little bit of something for everyone, way beyond just one department, that we hope will all come to fruition. Natalie is going to take over now, and one of the things I can say about Natalie and the culture team is that their dedication puts us in really good standing for the next part of this, because even though this is a protocol, the really important part is the implementation plan. And I have every confidence, having seen the commitment of these staff over the last few years and the great relationship that they have built with the partners, that we're going to get good results, and that when we report back to you, there will be significant accomplishment in terms of implementing the protocol. So Natalie, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Dan. Good morning, everybody. I will be talking about the content of the protocol. Can you please pass to the next slide? So the Civic Cultural Protocol is structured in 5 parts. The preamble explains the origin of the protocol that you have heard from Dan's presentation already. It introduces the Anishinabe Algonquin Nation and the City of Ottawa as partners. And it identifies the City of Ottawa commitment to continue collaborating with the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation, and this collaboration be rooted in respect, in mutual respect and responsibility. Part 2 of this protocol provides the definition that you have it in this slide there. So the civic cultural protocol frames and establishes a formal relationship between parties, providing a guide for relationship building, for partnership development, and for shared action. And in this case, in the actions would be in arts, heritage, and culture. Part 2 also outlines the goals and benefits of establishing a cultural protocol. Please, could you pass the slide? Part 3 of the protocol provides the broad existing context of since time immemorial concepts, as well as local, provincial, national, and international guidelines and legislation that form the foundational contextual information essential to deepen the understanding, facilitate relationship building, and support the collaboration in between the Anishinaabe, Algonquin Nation, and the City of Ottawa. Some of these examples of these concepts and documents and guideline documents are in this slide. Could you pass the next slide, please? Part 3 also presents the mutually developed principles and commitments for working in collaboration. So as you can see, these principles and commitments have been put forward by the Anishinaabe, Algonquin Nation, and the City of Ottawa cultural and partner services areas. Next slide, please. Part 4 of the protocol provides important background information on the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation, including the definition of unceded territory, the identification of the 11 federally recognized Anishinaabe Algonquin First Nations and tribal councils, and the context around urban Anishinaabe Algonquin members living and working in Ottawa. Next slide, please. Finally, part 5 is the implementation plan. We have learned that commitment is demonstrated through action. Actually, it was one of the first things that we heard directly from former chief from Kirigan-Zibi Anishinaabe First Nation, Gilbert White Duck, in our first meeting that we had in October of 2010. The implementation plan then translates our commitment into action. It was developed by the city's Cultural Development and Initiative Unit with the collaboration of City of Ottawa Cultural and Connected Services, who crafted objectives and actions in 19 areas of municipal cultural work. You can see, those 19 areas in this word cloud in this slide. One example of these objectives and actions is the cultural awareness building about the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation through the creation of an educational video in collaboration with the nation. This is an action that is currently under development. To monitor the implementation of this protocol and the implementation of this plan, a consultative cultural circle will be established in 2022 with representatives of the 11 federally recognized Anishinaabe Algonquin First Nations. They will gather 2 to 3 times per year, and as I mentioned, to monitor the implementation of the plan and to provide or respond to specific questions from various City of Ottawa departments. The protocol and the implementation plan are living documents to be reviewed for relevance and measured for accountability every 5 years. We are committed to continue learning and collaborating, working together with the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation. Thank you.
Okay, Dan, I don't know who you want to turn it over to next.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I believe that now is the time for the chiefs and the representatives to speak. I leave it to you to call on them to say a few words.
Acting Grand Chief Savannah McGregor.
Acting Grand Chief, please go ahead.
Hey, good morning. Bon matin à tous. Hello. It's my pleasure to be here. What a great day, and to see this work come to fruition and to be presented here means so very much to our nation. I'd like to acknowledge the good work that has been done in an extremely appropriate way. It sets the bar to future working relations, and that is key to moving forward in a good way that truly honors the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation. This protocol is a step forward in honoring our history and our future on our unceded territory. And I'd like to commend all parties' efforts that have made this a reality, for following through with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's call to action, Article 57. Miigwech for your ongoing commitment and for working with us in collaboration. On April 13th, the vote is yours, and it would be beautiful to have it be a yes, and miigwech.
Thank you, Grand Chief. Grand Chief Lisa Robinson, please go ahead.
Kwe kekina, mino kijigen. Hello, everyone. Bonjour à tous. It's a nice day, is what I stated in my language here. And today I'm coming to you from Temiskaming First Nation, which is located at the top of the Gitchisibi, or the Great River. Weather-wise, it may not be a nice day, a little bit of rain, freezing rain, but it is a nice day that, we're at this point now where this Algonquin Nation and City of Ottawa Civic Cultural Protocol and Implementation Plan is taking a huge step. So it is a momentous day. And with that being said, I would like to acknowledge and say Chi-miigwech to our elders, Elder Dumont and Elder Bernard, for, providing their thoughts and their energy and opening us up here in a good way today. And I would also like to commend everybody that has been involved in the development of this. This work has been, took some time to do. And, and especially central to this was the City of Ottawa Culture and Arts and Heritage Department. They've been instrumental in making this work happen. So I'd just like to really say Chi-miigwech to them. The intent of this document was to work in the spirit of collaboration. So I'm really happy to be here and speak to this, in partnership. And it's such an important key partner to have us and the City of Ottawa. The City of Ottawa is located in the heart of Algonquin territory. Our people have been here since time immemorial and will continue to be here. So working on this aspect, talking about culture and heritage is so central to land. And that is the key element, in terms of this work moving forward. Elder Dumont referred to the creation story and the Gitchisibi and how that is so tied to our identity as Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation. And I'm so glad to see that being such a huge part of this plan, and that we, as the rights and title holders to the territory, were involved in this process, and that we were at the table with this process. So Chi-miigwech for making that happen, City of Ottawa. It's a meaningful relationship. It's a relationship that, we look forward to continuing to develop. This is a first step. We have a solid framework. We're excited to go. And it is a first step, and we talk about reconciliation in this day. Well, following through with the implementation of this plan is a form of reconciliation. And that's where it counts. In our language, I'm told by our elders that we do not have a word for sorry, because the way we look at it is that that is represented by your actions. So the city of Ottawa, you have a really great plan with a lot of key actions in it. And I look forward to that work and how it's going to carry out and continue to involve us with the consultative circle, which involves representation from all of the 11 Anishinaabe Algonquin nations to continue this work forward. So again, in the spirit of reconciliation, we look forward to walking this path forward with our relationship and partner, the city of Ottawa, and seeing where this is going to take us. This is the start of something good. And it's been a long time coming. And I think, it'll continue to grow and develop. And I look forward to that relationship continuing. Chimigwich.
Chimigwich, Grand Chief. Reconciliation. That's exactly what we're looking for today. Incredible. Thank you so much. Chief White Duck, no stranger to our committee, certainly. Please go ahead, sir.
Good morning, everyone. First and foremost, I'd like to acknowledge the elders for the prayer this morning, and all those who got this whole process and got this project going, Nadley, and our elders from all the communities who contributed to this. It is a document that should move forward, and I believe. I'm sure your members in the city of Ottawa and the people who vote you in would be very accepting of this. And, it's just an important process, I believe. And it's going to be quite disappointing if it doesn't get passed or the motion doesn't move forward with your city, and if it doesn't move forward. This is why it's so important to reiterate this, that the only way to move forward in terms of reconciliation is to work with the First Nation communities who want to work with the city of Ottawa. And it's fundamentally strong that we remind you that this is the unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. And this has to be made aware. And you're doing a great job doing so with the name-ins and everything going on. But, when we met with Jim Watson, the mayor of the city of Ottawa, on January 17th, he brought forward a motion to rename Wellington Street Reconciliation Way. And I had a little bit of a problem with that when he approached myself and Chief Wendy Jocko. And I asked, how could you rename a street Wellington to Reconciliation Way when you don't? And I asked, what is reconciliation to you? And the mayor couldn't answer that question. So for yourselves and all the council members here, it's important you understand the meaning of that word and understand that the people who vote you in as leaders of the city of Ottawa, that you have a firm answer when someone asks you this, because you don't want to be caught empty-handed and not being able to answer that question, right? Because what is reconciliation to you? If I ever to ask everyone this question, it's a very difficult question to answer. So I'd say just be accountable to the people and to the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people, and having that answer when you are asked that question is very important, because we could all say we want to have reconciliation, we all want to move forward, but if we can't even answer that simple question, then we can't move forward, right? So I do hope this motion does get passed. I do hope that the city understands my plea that this is a positive step forward, and the people of Ottawa should be made clear that this is a one good step towards reconciliation. And I always feel like, we always take one step forward, but sometimes we take two steps back. So we're always behind. So that's what I want to highlight the importance of. And thank you to everyone, and good luck to Lindsay Kirby McGregor in her role in getting this whole project started. And once it's adopted, she's going to be very busy with all four of us and the communities involved in this. So Kichimigwech, and hope everyone has a great day. Okay. Miigwech.
Miigwech, Chief. Wise words, and thank you for that. Councillor Dan Kahoko.
Good morning, everyone. I wanted to acknowledge and say thank you to the elders for the prayers and good work this morning. I also wanted to say the same to my fellow Algonquins who just finished speaking. Chief Wendy Jocko was not able to be here, so she did ask me to stand in and perhaps and say a few words if it was on the agenda, and I see that it is. She didn't leave any particular message, so I'm going to go back to an earlier experience that I had working with the city in respect of culture and cultural protocol at the time. I put forward the idea that the city of Ottawa is located on unceded, unsurrendered Algonquin traditional territory. And it's also a place of that Canadians come to visit as their national capital, but it's also a place where the international community comes into Canada as well. We have embassies here, we have all kinds of places like that. And I said, the one thing that the city needs to have by way of a cultural demonstration is for those people, whether they're from within Canada, whether they're First Nations from elsewhere in Canada, whether they're international visitors, they need to know and they need to understand that they are on Algonquin traditional territory. They need to know that. And there needs to be some cultural displays put up within the city, around the city, to actually demonstrate that. So I think that that is one thing that I was working for in the past. I know we have put a cultural worker in place to work on a number of projects, and I haven't given that kind of information to him. I believe that Natalie, who has been involved with the for quite a long time, is aware of what my thoughts were in relation to that kind of messaging. But I do believe that we really need to put our brand on this territory, on the city, because it is in the heart of our territory, our traditional territory. And the cultural things that are around supporting us, I applaud that. I believe that they're very much on board with working with us, and I think we're very much on board with advising them about the right way to do things. So that's what I would say. The protocol, I think, is a very good initiative. It outlines some of the stuff that we can actually work to improve our relationship and tell the world who we are. I really believe that that's the case. I know that Chief Wendy Jocko supports doing that, exactly that, and I stand behind her from our end, and I know that the chief of council, the full council here, would also stand behind that. So the West people, keep up the good work. I mean, because I do just fast from what I can see. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. And today is the culmination of that commitment to continuing to work together on these very, very important items. So I thank you so much for that tangible example of something that we can do to work together in reconciliation. So thank you so much, Councillor. We truly appreciate your time with us today. Dan, do you have anything further before we bring the item before the committee?
No, Chair, that is the extent of the presentation, and we're open to questions.
Thank you very much. Questions to staff? Councillor Fleury, please, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and I won't be too long. I too want to thank the chiefs, elected members who came to this morning to speak candidly to us, and also to share opportunities and synergies and challenges that we have and will face together. Chair, I'm not sure if it's best suited for the city to respond, or maybe in reflection of what Chief White Duck was saying, I would want to create that space if that's possible. But with the 19 objectives that are in front of us, how does he see best fit for us to find a kind of a continued sounding board, so that if there are issues that arise, we can quickly respond, evaluate, and improve on. And I'm curious to understand, and from the city, but also from Chief White Duck, because I believe his comment was very fair, and we have to recognize those challenges that we all face. So, Chair, I'm in your hands, but I would love to hear from Chief White Duck some clarity, and maybe Dan after could add or clarify from the city's perspective.
Certainly, Chief White Duck, please, if you'd like to go first.
Yeah, no problem. As I mentioned, I think your city has to approve this motion, get this project and get this protocol in place. First and foremost, as I mentioned, it's important that the city understands this, and this right now is a perfect and great step towards reconciliation. You know, you have to work with the First Nations people, not demand what the First Nations have to do, right? That's not the way it should be presented and worked around. So you got some great partners here, Councillor Matt Fleury. We're dedicated to helping you if this protocol is implemented and worked on. And you know, there's many implementation, as you mentioned, to work on. You know, and the only way to move forward in terms of, as I mentioned, reconciliation is work with the communities. We're not your enemy. We're your friends. We're your allies in a modern day society that we live in here in 2022. You know, but rightfully so. You know, we've never surrendered, or we never gave up the title and territory of the land that you're all standing and sitting on right now. And so this has to move forward, and you know, I just want to say we're willing to work with you. Just give us a chance to work on this protocol for the next 4 or 5 years.
Thank you, Chief. Grand Chief Robinson, please. Yes, go ahead. Oh, Grand Chief, if you can just remove yourself from mute. Sorry.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, no
I
problem.
just want to continue to elaborate on the relationship piece here. This has been an ongoing work for some 12 years now, and you know, and we've built that rapport, and we continue to build that relationship and that trust with the city of Ottawa. Absolutely. And as the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation, we're absolutely committed to this process and working with the city of Ottawa. You know, the city of Ottawa is the heart of our territory. And I know this is the first step, and this is a solid framework now that can guide that relationship. And it is a living document. So as things come up in the future, we're definitely committed to being a part of the solution. And that's where we want to be. You know, our people have been here at the heart of our territory, welcoming settlers from time immemorial, and we still are here today. And we still want to continue that work as well, because we know that it's such an important place in our territory for our culture and our identity as Anishinaabe. So, Chimiigwech.
And then from the city side of this collaborative table, Dan, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. One of the things that Natalie mentioned earlier is that right away in 2022, one of the action plans is to form a consultative circle. Because we understand that it's been a while, and we've been working, Natalie and her group have been working closely with our partners. But there was a sense that there is a lot of work on the table here, and I think that the point has been made that you know, actions need to be strong now. And we didn't envision a situation where we would go off and do this on our own, that we needed a mechanism. And so we will work to get that circle established, to have a governance and a consultative process that works. And it is a work in progress. And so if what we designed and recommended through this needs to be modified, we will do that. We are open to that. We're open to finding something that works so that there is good communication, good consultation, and good progress. So we think we have an immediate mechanism in place to get off on a solid launch with everybody talking to each other. Thank you.
Seeing a lot of nodding heads around the table while everyone was speaking on that one, which is always a very good start. Councillor Fleury, please go ahead.
Yeah, Chair, thank you so much. And thank you, Chief Robinson and White Duck and Dan for your answers. Maybe Chair, and I don't know that we'll resolve this at this table today, but for our consideration, I appreciate the Circle initiative, and let's not slow down that process. But as we end this term, I think it is important in the future terms that council look at a liaison role for a member, for an elected member, either from this committee or from council as a whole, because right now, as we can see, we have elected members that are with us today. And it's great to have staff support. It's great to have the community support more broadly. But I think it'll be important also to have a council liaison, as we've done so successfully in gender equity and in racial efforts as well. So in breaking racial barriers as well. So I want to make sure that we consider that maybe that either chair through you or directly to Dan. I see Dan nodding as well. I don't know if it's part of that governance or if we give direction to the clerk to consider it for next term. I'll leave it in your capable hands.
Thank you very much. No, I think that that's an excellent point to be making, Councillor. I'd like to on behalf of the committee, move that as a direction to the city clerk's office to have that be considered as part of our first governance report upon reconvening council post the 2022 election. I think that that's an incredible idea and a great contribution to the committee today. Thank you for that, Councillor. Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you very much, Chair. I like that suggestion. My question was actually going to be about the role of councillors in working on this. I realize it's more directly with staff in the city, but I wanted to know where councillors fit in and to make sure that we're following protocol, et cetera, and that we're part of the solution and part of that working together. So I do like that idea of a liaison, and of course there's a lot of intersectionality as I'm aware as the liaison on women and gender equity. So obviously it's working together on that as well. But any suggestions for councillors as well is very helpful. Thank you.
That's an excellent question, and I think that part of strengthening our ties between the host nation and the city of Ottawa are those interpersonal relationships that can be developed between Ben councils and our council as well. And I think that there's obviously a lot of learning to do on our side, and I think that the best way to do that is between individuals. Being able to, in the spirit of friendship and collaboration, being able to ask those questions and work together and work through these things. I think that's an excellent question, Councillor. Would it be most appropriate for our staff to comment on that, or would any of the host nation chiefs or councillors wish to comment on that? Yes, please go ahead, Grand Chief.
Okay. I think those ideas are great, in terms of moving forward with the relationship, because like I said, this is the first step of this. And I think if we can figure out better ways to work together, we're all, selected to lead in our communities, and you as councillors as well. And I think there could be a process that even at that level, looking at, doing some of that work vis-a-vis together, and implementing it that way as well could be another aspect to this too. It's, my understanding of the city of Ottawa is that, you have a large organization with many different departments. And I think for us as the Algonquin Anishinabe Nation here, what we need to be looking at is tying in, at the proper way. And I think, that conversation could be furthered in terms of how we see that and how we see our role in taking our seat at the table. you know, and I really appreciate, you know, these ideas and stuff. And I think it's open to further discussion. Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Any further questions, Councillor Kavanagh, or comments?
No, that's fine. Thank you very much.
This is a wonderful discussion. Thank you very much for all the contributions to it today. Councillor Deans. We just can't hear you.
Sorry.
No problem.
Chair, you asked about the role of council. I do believe that there is a significant role for each of us in fostering our own knowledge and understanding. When I was the chair of CPS last term, I worked closely with many of the leaders in the communities, and we actually went to visit the reservations and spend some time with the communities. And I think that was very helpful for all members of council. So I might suggest that that's something we can do. I think the more understanding that we have and the more ties that bind us together, the better it will be going forward. And I think I could answer the question of what reconciliation means to me. And I think the more we work together, the easier the answer to that kind of question would be. So that would be my suggestion. Thank you.
I think that that's an excellent suggestion. And I think that this committee would be very open to an invitation of that sort to garner better understanding and knowledge. I think that that would be a wonderful idea. And thank you very much for that suggestion today, Councillor Deans. Councillor Brockington, please.
Thank you, Chair. And although I don't sit on this committee, I'm here today because this report and progress is important to me, as it is to the city and our allies in the First Nations in this area. And I wasn't planning to speak, but I just want to compliment some comments that have already been made. And that is, I strongly believe that progress and deeper and more meaningful progress between our First Nations brothers and sisters in the city can be even better if we have opportunities to meet each other. As a city council, we have not sat down with our First Nations brothers and sisters in an informal setting, not to have a business meeting, but simply to meet one another and talk and learn from each other. And I know this term of council is slowly coming to an end, and maybe opportunities are perhaps better for the next council, but I strongly believe that in most situations, you can make much more progress together if you have opportunities to get to know each other on a personal level. And that's been lacking from the city of Ottawa. The mayor might reach out and have one-on-one meetings, or committee chairs, or even our staff who have gone for visits, and that's great. But if it's nation to nation, we have to show up as a council. And I think as our chair, if you could take that away from me and raise that with the mayor, I very much want to sit down with our First Nations brothers and sisters for that conversation. I've had Chief White Duck, the older Chief White Duck, I'm not sure if it's the father of the current Chief White Duck in River Ward for events, appreciate those opportunities. But I do think those informal conversations are just as important, and I would like to see that happen. So thank you.
My commitment to do so, Councillor Brockington, an excellent contribution as well today. I do see that Acting Grand Chief McGregor would like to speak on this item, so please go ahead.
Mcleod, Matthew, I'd just like to share that we're here, and you know what the history of our nation has looked like and the things that we've gone through, and we must always keep moving forward and keep our eyes on the horizon and keep our shoulders back and our chin up. And this protocol is a beautiful seed of a new relationship and a new direction with a vision that honors and respects us, and we help create our and we have to work together, and this commitment and the ideas and these discussions are key to getting to that place that everybody wants to be. So miigwech, and thank you.
Miigwech. Do we have any further questions on this item? I think that it's important that we have a strong endorsement of the 3 items in front of us going into council. So I'd like to propose that we vote on each item, please. So the 3 recommendations coming out of this report are: 1, so we'll vote on each. Receive and approve the City of Ottawa, Anishinabe, Algonquin Nation Civic Cultural Protocol and Implementation Plan, attached as document 1, and as outlined in this report. On item number 1, is this item carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Excellent. Item number 2, direct staff to initiate the recommended actions toward achieving the objectives outlined in the implementation plan section of document number 1. Is this item carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Thank you. Item number 3, direct staff to report back to Community and Protective Services Committee and Council on the status of this implementation plan actions by Q2 2024. Is this item carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Excellent. A strong endorsement of this report at this committee. This will rise to council at our next meeting, and we very, very much looking forward to getting started on the work that we've begun today. Thank you so much to the elders, to our poet laureate, to our speakers today, to our grand chiefs, council members that have joined us to speak today. Your wisdom was well received, and we certainly appreciate this first step toward a beautiful and successful strengthened relationship. So thank you so much for being with us today. Item number 2 is the recreation renewable funding and facility access. This is quite a report. Dan, I just wanted to give you an opportunity just to kind of recap this report prior to looking at this item. But before we do so, I neglected to ask if anybody had anything on the consent agenda that they wanted to lift, or if we can carry the consent agenda just before moving on to this item. Is the consent agenda carried?
Carried.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you very much. So Dan, I don't know if you want to give just a very brief couple of words on this item.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. There is no presentation. This report deals with 2 things: renewable recreation funding and essentially access agreements for communities to recreation buildings that are not generally staffed. So through things like key agreements and consent to enter agreements. The purpose of this report is really to provide policy and delegated authority to staff to continue to do what we've been doing. The funding programs, the corporate funding program has evolved, and council has approved several changes to it since amalgamation. The recreation envelope, the renewable recreation funding envelope, has always fallen a little bit out of scope of those pieces. And 2008 audit identified that we really did need a policy of our own. We've worked with other corporate partners to see if we could fit it into theirs. Primarily what we're looking at is anchor groups in each community being funded to deliver programs and manage facilities within their own neighborhoods. And this policy will essentially standardize the policy provisions for those agreements and provide the proper authorities so that come review and renewal time, there is authority to continue to fund these groups and to provide them access to city facilities. So there is no change, there's no direct impact in terms of level of funding or change in agreement for any of the existing groups, but it does provide a roadmap as funding becomes available to to create new agreements for new projects as we go forward.
Excellent. Thank you for that summary. The honorable and distinguished gentleman from West Carleton March, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Dan, for bringing this up, this report. So one of the questions we get asked quite often, as you know, we are in a rural area. We run our own community facilities and programming and so on. But some of the funding, Dan, has not been reviewed in many years. I can honestly say probably since the amalgamation. So we did some changes, and I don't deny it, and I appreciate it, because the city took on paying the taxes on those property, took on the utility costs, which is very substantial. But whether and I'm not sure if it's inside the city core we have some, but I mean, just to put it in perspective, in my ward alone, I have 7 community associations. They do a great job looking after the facility, run programs, all this on behalf of the city, but their funding has not been changed. So after you receive this direction from the committee or this support from the committee, are we planning on revisiting the funding model to see, you know, like how could they still operate from many years ago? That's my question.
Thank you for the question. Chair, you are correct that what you see today in terms of the profile and then the documents are attached to the report largely reflect pre-amalgamation funding to these groups, and each individual 11 municipalities in the past use different formulas, different approaches to set the funding. Coming into amalgamation, departments were given some specific directions to maintain that funding at the levels that they were, and did not provide any funding to harmonize or to essentially to address what could be perceived as inequities between the groups. So what you see today is the profile of that. We have started to look at individual groups and what they get versus what they deliver. And yes, looking to the future, for the next term of council at this point, we will look at what further adjustments. This report does not do any of that because it simply properly establishes policy for what exists. The review of what can be done and the resources that would be required to make adjustments is something for the next term of council.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Dan. I really appreciate your response. And so but there's nowhere it's saying here we will be reviewing the funding model in the next term of council, or that's gonna come, you know, as a commitment from you to review the funding model.
Yeah, so that'll come as part of the next term of council's work plan, and I can't tell you whether it'll be in the first year or the second year. We know that generally these types of reports have to be in the early parts of a term of council, and so we will look at that, but we don't have an exact work plan set out for that yet.
Okay, well, Mr. Chair, if I can just use 1 minute to say thank you to all the volunteers across the city, and especially in those communities, because they do a great job on behalf of us. And I think Mr. Chanier would agree those communities run very efficient and very well with their program with the very little funding. If you have to staff those, it will be a lot more costly if to staff them with city staff. So I'm grateful for what they do, but at the same time we need to keep the support, because a formula used 20 years ago during the amalgamation really has to be revisited at some point. But thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Dan, for bringing this report forward. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Fleury, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Dan, for the report. I don't have a particular item to raise, but more generally from a policy point of view, I'm curious to understand, we have a number, as Councillor Del Chantiri raised, we have a number of amazing partners with the city who support communities and really bring amazing programming. And I'm not doubting that in any way, shape, or form. But what is the city doing to review the allocation of times and spaces? As you know, I have a couple of local examples that I imagine apply to groups across the city, where there are periods of time, that it'd be the summer, that it'd be on weekends, that it'd be in the evening, where there's less programming in certain areas for certain groups, yet it's still city spaces often, and city, we have a mandate to keep those doors open. And so what is our policy to ensure maximization of spaces? And if the groups that we fund don't necessarily have programming, how do we ensure that that space is accessible for rental for the community?
Thanks for the question. We are going to undertake, and Councillor, you and I have talked a little bit about this. We are looking at especially scarce resources, and gymnasiums is probably our best example in terms of community spaces that are at a premium. And so we are looking at how we can create a citywide approach to allocation of those facilities, including partner-run facilities. We are mindful that it is controversial. It is a part of the model that exists and that existed in most of the legacy municipalities, was community determination, community development, and allowing the community some level of autonomy. But we also know that as those relationships have evolved, there are perhaps different opportunities to increase the use of the city facility. So we are looking at that in a very specific way. We're also looking at, part of this is contract management related at a higher level, aside from the specific facility use. The Auditor General in a past audit identified that more attention needed to be paid to contract management, and making sure that what the contracts specify is as a requirement, a delivery for these groups. More rigor needs to be placed on confirming, verifying those things. And so at the last budget, 2022 budget, Council approved a new position, which an FTE, that will in fact be the core of a contract management service to bring some discipline, some rigor, some specialized resources into contract management, so that, and because we have a lot, the specific auditor recommendation was more focused on P3s. But as we look at it, we have a basket of P3s, we have a basket of renewable recreation funding, we have cultural funding. So we have all of these programs that are purchasing services from others. And so we are looking at how we bring some discipline and better focus on value for money, getting what we've negotiated with the groups, all of those things. So that is coming, and we're just in the process of developing that now.
Thank you, Dan. And just a quick follow-up, Mr. Chair. So on that front, I recognize change can be perceived as controversial, but I believe, my fundamental belief as a member of council, and the reason why I'm comfortable with that is, if the groups for which we fund and are partners with have secure and we're not challenging their programs, which means you have a program during that block, we're not trying to compete, but when you're not using the space, that be returned for as a community accessible. I think it's much less controversial than we might expect. It's a bit of a change in the relationship of that environment. So in that spirit, Dan, as a follow-up matter, do you see that the current allocation system that the city has, what I used to, when I worked, and when Councillor Luloff and I were lifeguards on a pool deck, we'd work on the class system. And I know that you're merging that to a different system. Will you have the tools then to be able to equip those facilities on that central list, because I think that's also part of the solution, which is that communities can be empowered if the facility's closed, or if there's room for a gymnasium, if there's an opportunity for rental, to access it.
Yes, Chair, and in fact, this is a window of opportunity because we are changing over systems. So there is now an opportunity to look in a different way at treating community facilities much in the same way that we've treated ice allocation, for example, at least in part, perhaps not for the entire. Maybe it's to use a popular hybrid. Maybe it's a hybrid approach, where the local staff have some allocation capability, but there is also a higher mandated city approach for things like gymnasiums. Not only would that perhaps you lead to better optimization, but much like in the world of sports fields and ice, a centralized ability to book gyms, for example, for basketball leagues or pickleball leagues or whatever, would create one-stop shopping, which I think would, move us from a call around to 5 or 6 facilities to find gym time type of thing. So that's something we're working on, and that we're hopeful that we'll be able to roll out. Some of the specific to gyms, some of that is being worked out for implementation sooner rather than later.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you for the response. And Chair, I do think it's an important consideration. We have strong community partners. We're not challenging that. There is an opportunity to maximize the use of city facilities.
No, definitely a point well taken, Councillor. Thank you very much. Up next is my friend who is the most excited about melting ice in Britannia Bay. I know she can't wait to get in. Councillor Kavanagh, please go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, we have a contest of when the Christmas trees melt and fall down into the water. What day? And by last year, they were done. Thank you very much, and thank you, Dan, General Manager, for meeting with me this week to talk about this, because I wanted to look at these legacy funds that I mean, it's kind of a, they're not broken, so don't fix it, because they're working and they're doing good things in communities all over the city. But we do have to look at the future, and we're getting different models, and I'm particularly concerned about inner urban areas where we do have to bring in more programming as we have intensification. So we need looking at different models, and we've already discussed this, and I know it's beyond this list, but in terms of field houses becoming mini recreation centers and communities, and how we manage them. And we have some great models in terms of what the Winter Trails did, in terms of groups of volunteers working together with the city, bringing fabulous resources to the communities. So I just wanted your take on how we move forward in terms of bringing more recreation facilities and opportunities to inner urban areas that are being intensified.
Thank you, Councillor. Chair, and the Councillor and I discussed this earlier this week. Today's report does not necessarily solve these problems because it doesn't create new money to fund new groups, but it does provide the template for creating agreements. And in the case of Bay Ward, Councillor Kavanagh has a few seasonal buildings that, with a bit of capital money, will hopefully be turned into year-round community space of limited scope, but nonetheless. And those are not a lot different than some of the community spaces in other communities where field houses, rink buildings have been turned into year-round programming space. What this program what you're approving today will allow us to do is create an authority, a delegated authority, and a mechanism for community groups to, perhaps initially without funding, have access to those buildings through a license to use them, much the same way that a lot of our groups do. But when there is eventually some funding available, to also provide seed funding or perhaps some core funding to help coordinate programs and those kinds of things. I did mention to the councillor that since amalgamation, some groups have come along where funding was available, but we had a heck of a time figuring out a way to get it to them because we didn't have and there's always the approach of going to council, but often for small amounts, a few $1,000s, it's difficult. And we've talked about the winter trails that the councillor mentioned. The sports council is an example before where we had money, but a heck of a time delivering money to them. This report provides the proper framework to be able to do that seamlessly without delay type of thing.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate that because we're looking forward, and as we have more people in our city, we need to bring more resources. We're bringing in all these projects, and this is a very, very important part to balance it out, and I think we make good use of our city facilities that we have, and as you said, expand them. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
I'd like to publicly offer my congratulations to the next councillor who's up to speak, whose home community of Navan defeated Orleans in the championship for the Bradley Cup this last weekend. 2 years in a row, Orleans has held the Bradley Cup, but Navan decided to really step up their game and beat us this weekend. So congratulations, Councillor Kitts, and please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Next year, we'll have to make it interesting, have a friendly bet on the line. But just really quickly, Dan, I was wondering if your team had a plan to reach out to impacted community associations to inform them of some of the new criteria.
Thank you, Councillor. We can certainly do that. There isn't a set plan, and for the most part, what we are doing today is formalizing a process for groups that are either already funded or already have access. If we had more money, if there was a pot of undesignated money, then we may well promote that. What we are trying to balance off right now is that there really isn't a budget to expand this program at this point. And so we are certainly working with there's probably about 60 groups to make them aware, both on the funding and the access side of the new framework that council has approved. I guess I would have to think about how we take it beyond that. It would certainly start to bleed into discussions that we have with groups that are looking for things like access to buildings, to do programming and those kinds of things, because we now have a council approved document. So that'll be the tool that we use to lay out what is possible and what the requirements are. Councillor, we can look at something beyond that, but to be frank, at this point, we have not.
Okay, no, that's fine. I know that there's at least 2 community associations that in my area that might be impacted, so we can take that offline, but I just want to make sure that they're aware of any of the changes.
Happy to work with you to work that out.
Okay, great. Thanks very much.
Yep.
Congratulations again, champ. I'm looking forward to next year when Orleans comes back. We hope we'll rally. Any further questions on this item? Seeing none, is this item carried?
Carried.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. We have a number of commemorative naming proposals, one with a significant number of delegations. The first one being in Canada North. This is item number 3 on our agenda, Lyndon Hooper Park. So that the Community and Protective Services Committee recommend council approve the proposal to rename the River Chase Park located at 570 Wintercrest Road, Lyndon Hooper Park. We do not have any delegations on this item, and this was supported both by staff and the ward councillor. Is this item carried?
Carried.
Carried. Item number 4, of which we do have some delegations. We have 8 delegations on this item. This is in Councillor Fleury's ward, Rideau Vanier, a commemorative naming proposal for Cindy Mitchell Park. So that the Community and Protective Services Committee recommend Council approve the proposal to rename the Sir Wilfrid Laurier Park located at 288 Chapel Street, just around the corner from my old apartment when I was in university, Cindy Mitchell Park, an incredible contributor to the Sandy Hill community. And up first for delegations, we have Morna Ballantyne, who's the Executive Director of the Childcare Advocacy Association of Canada, the CCAAC. Morna, welcome and looking forward to your presentation. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair and members of the committee. As you said, my name is Morna Ballantyne and I'm the Executive Director of Canada's National Childcare Advocacy Association. I live and work in Ottawa, located in unceded, unsurrendered Algonquin Anishinabe territory. I'm so pleased to speak in support of the application to commemorate Cindy Mitchell by renaming Sir Wilfrid Laurier Park on Chapel Street. Others are going to elaborate on Cindy's remarkable contribution to the community and to families. Others will recount her extraordinary work over 27 years and her role in transforming a small, mostly volunteer-run nursery school into the thriving early center that it is today. I want to address how timely this commemorative naming would be and the historic marker that it would plant. Last Monday, the governments of Canada and Ontario signed an agreement that will bring our province into a new Canada-wide system of early learning and childcare. Over time, the system will make affordable, high-quality childcare universally accessible. The Royal Commission on the Status of Women called for this major reform more than 50 years ago. Until now, community childcare programs in Ottawa and across the country exist only because of the dedicated and selfless early childhood educators like Cindy Mitchell. These women, and yes, they are almost all women who work in early childhood education, have had to scrape together funds to turn whatever space they can find into vibrant, caring, and learning environments. For decades, early childhood educators have spent long hours, mostly unpaid or very poorly paid, running programs. They've done it without adequate public funding. They've had to rely on parent fees and bake sales to pay the bills. Community childcare programs are forced to walk a fine line between charging high fees, high enough to provide quality services, but not so high that parents have to withdraw their children for financial reasons. This scenario has meant parent fees as high as $2,000 a month for each child, but it's not enough revenue to pay staff close to a decent salary. The pandemic confirmed the importance of safe, reliable childcare, and it exposed the fragility of the childcare sector. Many childhood educators had to leave their jobs to care for their own children or other family members. Those who could keep working did so at grave risk of infection. Necessary protocols to protect the young, unvaccinated children made everything more difficult. It took months for childcare centers in Ontario to receive proper personal protective equipment and ventilation systems because childcare has never been a first priority of government until now. Cindy Mitchell is an emblem of the strength and tenacity of early childhood educators. This commemorative naming would be public recognition of the central importance of early learning and childcare to the well-being of children, families, and community. It would honor childcare advocates like Cindy, who have pushed for all the policy changes that the new childcare agreement will bring to Ottawa, changes that will benefit generations to come. I urge you to support the application before you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And what a magnificent speech. We truly do appreciate that. As somebody with one child in childcare and one going into childcare, I truly appreciate all the advocacy that you've done. Thank you very much. Do we have any questions for this delegation? Seeing none, thank you again, Madam Ballantyne, for coming out today. We truly appreciate your words today. Prochaine, on a Stéphanie Plante ici pour donner un témoignage. Vas-y, Madame Plante.
Bonjour, est-ce que vous m'entendez?
Oui, et bienvenue.
Merci. Bonjour, Monsieur le Président, conseillers et conseillères, et surtout un gros merci au conseiller Fleury, grâce à qui je peux remercier pour avoir toujours appuyé les projets que nous entamons dans notre communauté. Lorsque le monde s'est arrêté en mars 2020, nos premiers intervenants et nos travailleurs essentiels ont continué à travailler. Peut-être comme jamais auparavant, nous réalisons le rôle que jouent les travailleurs essentiels qui contribuent à maintenir nos sociétés en état de marche. C'est grâce à eux que la nourriture parvient jusqu'à nos tables, grâce à eux que nos déchets sont ramassés à intervalles réguliers, que nos hôpitaux et nos systèmes de santé fonctionnent et que les plus vulnérables de notre société, dans ce cas des enfants, peuvent continuer leur apprentissage et que les femmes peuvent rester sur le marché du travail. A heightened recognition now exists across society regarding the need to value much essential work that we've been undervaluing and, may I say, also in some instances, underpaying. Il faut aussi souligner, même si ce n'est pas le cas ici, que de nombreux travailleurs de première ligne ou travailleurs essentiels sont des citoyens du monde qui envoient régulièrement de l'argent de leur poche dans leur pays d'origine. Today is the day in which we honor Sandy Hill's most famous frontline worker. Her name is Cindy Mitchell, and you will hear more about her in the following presentations. Finally, I want to address the criticism that I personally have received that changing the name of what is currently Wilfrid Laurier Park will somehow diminish the legacy or history of Canada's first Francophone Prime Minister, whose residence is across the future Cindy Mitchell Park. Ottawa will never forget Wilfrid Laurier. It's impossible. The street where you, Ottawa City Councillors, have your offices is Laurier Avenue. The most famous hotel is the Chateau Laurier. There is Wilfrid Laurier High School in Orleans, the Macdonald Laurier Institute, as well as l'Esplanade Laurier. And while not in Ottawa, there is also Wilfrid Laurier University, and he's also on the $5 bill. Nous pouvons façonner un monde plus équitable, fondé sur l'égalité, la durabilité et la justice. Pour cela, nous devons honorer la dignité du travail, non seulement en parole, mais en acte. Of course, COVID is not over, but this park will be a bright light for so many who often feel unrecognized in the toponymy of our nation's capital. Merci.
Des points tellement excellents. If we don't mind, Stephanie is also going to be introducing a video for our next speaker, who will obviously not be able to answer questions. So if we can hold off for questions for Stephanie just for a moment, we can watch the video of from Isaac McKeague, which has been submitted. Stephanie wants to introduce that video. I'd like, with the will of the committee, to allow her to do so, and then we can have questions for this witness following that video, if that's all right. I see a thumbs up from Councillor Fleury. Wonderful. Okay, vas-y, Stephanie. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. I would like to introduce Isaac, who, let's say, is a Betty Hyde, which is the childcare center which Cindy Mitchell worked, alumni. He is now in his 20s, and he wanted to speak to you today, but he couldn't be here via Zoom. Thank you so much.
I am one of hundreds and hundreds of Betty Hyde alumni. I started there in 1999 when I was 2.5. This marked the first time I was truly separated from my parents, and it was undoubtedly a bit scary for the high-strung, hyperactive, inattentive young child I was back then. But I found a home away from home at Betty Hyde, a home with caring adults who opened the world wider to me and taught me to stay full time. Chief among these caring adults was Cindy. What I remember from those early years is her warm presence, her calmness, her humor, and her constant interest in what I was doing and thinking. Cindy wasn't the only person at Betty Hyde who would help me, comfort me, and when necessary, correct me. There was also Janet and Lisa. These women were giant figures in my life. They made Betty Hyde a happy place I looked forward to going to each morning. I am now in the School of Management at university, and this gives me a new perspective on Cindy Mitchell and as the director of Betty Hyde. I now understand the role a leader plays in hiring the right people, building a dynamic team, and in creating the values and spirit of an institution. This gives me a much better sense of what Sydney achieved at Betty Hyde, establishing an institution where children played and learned, a place where they had fun, took on new challenges, and were loved. Betty Hyde was my gateway into the wider community. It was where I made friends I would see in parks and playgrounds of Sandy Hill, and later at school. I also knew their parents because Betty Hyde was a cooperative nursery where parents were required to volunteer. Only in retrospect can I see how Betty Hyde knit our community together, creating the warm and secure environment in which we grew and discovered ourselves. Betty Hyde alumni have a bond, a lasting attachment to the institution that forged this bond. Like my younger brother and sister and so many other alumni, I kept coming back to reconnect. As high schoolers, we volunteered to work with the children. I am nearly 25 now, and Cindy remains a friend of our family who cheers me and my brother and sister as we pass each new milestone. She and her husband Kurt have formed lifelong friendships with dozens and dozens of families who attended Betty Hyde. When we wonder whatever happened to a particular child we haven't seen for many years, Sydney will almost invariably be able to provide an update. I was excited to hear that Sir Wilfrid Laurier Park might one day be named after Cindy. I remembered the picnics Betty Hyde held at that park and how I loved to run through the sprinklers at the splash pad. We had graduation ceremonies there too. How fitting it would be to name the park after a woman who loved children and devoted her life to them. A woman who was a pioneer in early childhood education. A woman who has made such a lasting contribution to our community. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to tell you how I feel about this initiative.
Wow. Okay. So good luck to the rest of our witnesses speaking on this item, holding it together after that beautiful, beautiful testimony. I see that Councillor Fleury wanted to make a comment or ask a question of our delegation. Vas-y, conseiller.
Chair, we have no more space at Betty Hyde, so this is too good of a promotional video here. Please close your ears. Shows the great program that Cindy built in our community. Stephanie, thank you. I will use this very short opportunity to say that Action Sandy Hill has been very on the ball and organized in looking at naming issues in our community. As you know, Aniputukuk is now what was the former Sandy Hill Park. We have what's in front of us today with City Mitchell. I know that there's also a city request looking at some challenges that we face with emergency services between what is called a Sandy Hill Community Health Center and the Sandy Hill Community Center. So I want to personally thank Stephanie for a number of initiatives, but particularly the naming considerations and consultations that went around for that. And Mr. Chair, these submissions, today it's Cindy and there's a number of others, they're really led by the community, and I want to recognize that. We're only enablers at this committee for supporting our community's efforts. So thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Up next, to speak about Cindy Mitchell and refugee settlement, we have Abdul Rahman Al-Masri and Anas Al-Masri. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. And please go ahead, Mr. Al-Masri.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm sorry my brother Anas would not be able to join today, but I will try to suffice what I can say about the great Cindy. I'm a resident of Sandy Hill. I came to meet Cindy at a time where I was looking for a community to support me in a way that, to a cause that not only made me so proud to be a member of the Sandy Hill community, but also a cause that was able to bring a new family and made Sandy Hill their home. Sydney was a community leader, a mobilizer, or is a community leader and mobilizer, and a very trusted member of the community that everyone can rally behind. She's someone that the minute I met, when I was trying to find community members that would able to support me and my wife in terms of finding ways to sponsor my brother and his family, a family of 5 that at the time were asylum seekers in Jordan of Syrian origin, to come to Canada, fight peace and safety for them and for their kids. Sandy Hill was the dynamo, was the powerhouse, the individual that knows everyone and that everyone trusted. She was capable of so many things. The energy she carried, the emotion, the empathy, the support she provided is truly unparalleled. She is someone that was able to hold fundraisers, organize community members, to support in various capacities in a way that not only made was able to collect or gather so many members of Sandy Hill to support the initiative, that actually made people love being involved in the community and love doing good in the community. And with with her support and many others, but particularly with her support, we were able to within a few months to bring my brother and his family to Sandy Hill to resettle here. My nephew at the time also attended Betty Hyde. He was one of the students there. Cindy was one of the educators at the time. He graduated and now in primary school, but also my daughter today goes to Betty Hyde. And I don't have, it's an emotional thing for me to talk about Cindy, but I just want to make sure that this petition is really heard in light that Sydney is not only an educator, she's a unique educator, someone that is very worthy of being with children in a way that, provides so much support. But additionally, she's a true figure of Sandy Hill, a community leader, enabler, someone that everyone trusted. And that's a really unique character of someone to have, really rare for someone that's really trusted. And I think renaming the park in her name is doing service to Sandy Hill to remember the figure that she is. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and so glad to hear your story and of your children and your nephew and your brother as well. Thank you so much. Up next, we have Susan Kazraeli, or Kazelli, sorry. Susan, welcome to the committee, and please go ahead. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I'm following some pretty difficult acts, but I'll give it my best. Good morning. My name is Susan Kazelli. I'm the president of Action Sandy Hill, the community association in Sandy Hill. Action Sandy Hill supports this renaming. Our wonderful councillor, Mathieu Fleury, whose child probably only recently graduated daycare, supports this renaming. So do I. I'm going to speak primarily as a mother, but also as a visible minority. I take my children to play at Laurier Park, and his shadow is long. He represents a prime minister who would not have welcomed someone like me into Canada. And this is something that I and the 20% other of residents in Sandy Hill who are visible minorities know very well. Anyway, I met Cindy back in 2019. I was a first-time mom at the time, with no mom friends in Ottawa to have advised me that conception is in fact the best time to register on the city's long registry waitlist for a childcare spot. And now I was staring down the barrel of my return to work. My son was at the time 11 months old, and I had yet to find him a spot in daycare. I went to meet Cindy at Betty Hyde. She was warm, she was knowledgeable, she was extremely professional, and I so badly wanted my son to have a spot there. I liked her immediately, but she didn't have a spot for me at the time. She did know some home-run daycare providers who might in the community, and she gave me a list of names. And I remember leaving feeling disappointed, but also more supported at this stage of parenthood than I had in ages. So for me, as for so many other women, childcare enabled me to rejoin the workforce. Fast forward to March 2020, we're amid a global pandemic, and like so many others, I found myself working from home. Daycares were to remain open for the foreseeable future, and I was thankful because anyone who's ever parented a toddler will tell you they're a high maintenance bunch, and they're frankly way too young to understand concepts like deadlines, responsibilities, privacy in a bathroom or having a boss. And so I made it through the pandemic precisely because of the availability and the wonderful work that early childcare workers do every single day. Early childhood educators have been essential throughout the ups and downs of this pandemic, yet they were not included in the first group eligible for vaccination. Childcare centers were among the last to receive the rapid tests from the province. And as a result, many educators contracted COVID, and there were various outbreaks throughout daycares throughout the city. It really surprises me that they're among the most undervalued in our society, and I really hope that changes, and not just in terms of pay and benefits, but also in terms of the regard we afford them at a political and a societal level. These are the people that we trust with our future, with our most precious possession, our children. They're the ones who teach us to teach our children about the importance of learning and fun and sharing. And they make it possible for parents, both men and women, to return to work, to have a work-life balance. They have an immeasurable positive effect on women's opportunities, their career prospects and pay. And our society depends on them, our economy depends on them. And so having a park renamed after Cindy Mitchell, a former ECE, who, quite apart from having done her own job so well, has made numerous significant other contributions to the Sandy Hill community, would be a welcome first step at showing, I think, our collective gratitude and appreciation to all childcare workers. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Susan. Truly appreciate you coming out today. Up next, we have Baxter Williams. Welcome, Baxter. You have 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Well, thank you. Just to give a little context, I have 2 children who went to Betty Hyde in the late 90s and early 2000s. At that time, I served as the secretary and then treasurer of Betty Hyde. In 2012, I was invited back onto the board as treasurer again to assist with the transition from All Saints to Betty Hyde's new facility at the Carriage House. Before I begin, I'd just like to take a moment I have to admit, this has really caught me off guard. I'm not normally an emotional person.
It's okay.
Thank you. It's hard to imagine what I can add to the testimony that's been given today. It's just been so powerful. I would like to just make one note in a follow-up to Stephanie Plant's discussion of Sir Wilfrid Laurier, that I don't think she mentioned that the park, which is being proposed to be named after Cindy, is sits next to Laurier House, so that and so I think even in the Sandy Hill community, Sir Wilfrid Laurier receives recognition through Laurier House. I guess in terms of my observations, I'd just like to talk about my interactions with Cindy and sort of the qualities I see in her through the leadership and commitment that she's demonstrated to in her role within the community. Cindy's, just as the first example, Cindy, I think, as it's been noted, is just sort of widely recognized in the community as a leader. I think that was demonstrated through the construction of the Carriage House, where this was a major initiative, and it was through Cindy's contacts in the community that she could work with Leanne Musa to convince 20 people to provide nearly $750,000 in funding in order to build the Carriage House, and then just attract the interest of other people in this project. She also has served both through formal outreach and her informal contacts. She's used the Betty Hyde as a locus for community activities and to promote her causes through the annual spring fair, which provides a gathering point for Sandy Hill residents, through the use of the facilities to promote other causes such as refugee resettlement and environmental issues, so that her involvement in the community extends far beyond her role as a daycare provider. I was also struck when Betty Hyde moved into the Carriage House in 2012. This was a real time of transition for the organization as it moved from being a nursery school into a full service daycare center. And it was done at a time of uncertainty as the government introduced full day kindergarten, which really changed the model for the organization. And Cindy was just amazing in her ability to engage in outreach to various community leaders, including Matthew, Madeline Mayer, and others in order to get them on board and sort of promote Betty Hyde and raise awareness around our issues and help ensure the sustainability of the organization. I think the other thing worth mentioning is the personal commitment that's took from Cindy to undertake this transition. I don't know if any of you have undertaken a large renovation, but this is a job in itself, and she really did it on top of her regular job as the director of the daycare. Not only that, it wasn't not just a time commitment, but she also committed herself financially. By personally guaranteeing the mortgage for the new carriage house and putting in an equity investment. And I really think this is a demonstration of sort of her conviction and the commitment that she has shown to the community around her. I'll leave it at that. I realize I'm out of time, but thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk.
Thank you so much, Mr. Williams. We truly, truly appreciate your contribution today. Thank you for coming. Up next, we have the indomitable and magnificent, my friend, Janet LeBlanc. Please go ahead, Janet. You have 5 minutes.
Hi, thanks everybody for allowing me to speak about Cindy. Cindy is a very dear friend of mine. I'm the director at Betty Hyde Cooperative Early Learning Center. I've worked there for almost 25 years. I've known Cindy for that amount of time. I've had the pleasure to know her. I first met Cindy when I was an ECE student, when I came into Betty Hyde, when it was still in the church basement. I was immediately impressed by Cindy, and I knew that I wanted to work with her. I requested to do a placement at the school. Cindy was my mentor then, and I was very anxious to start working at Betty Hyde and fortunate enough to get a job there as soon as I graduated. I also just want to say thank you to everybody else who's spoken before me. I think it's really a very clear testament to what an amazing person Cindy is and what a sort of bastion of community and warmth and wonderfulness. I wrote a few things down, so I'm going to try not to be too emotional. I wanted to make note of Cindy's amazing professionalism and the fact that she is such an inspiration to me. Over the years, Cindy has been a mentor to me, along with so many others. I've had the good fortune to see Betty Hyde grow from a small nursery school program into the full-day childcare program it is today. There have been so many changes in the face of childcare since those early days. One thing that remained a constant was Cindy's continued effort to ensure we were offering the very best childcare program we could. She recognized the need for more bilingual childcare programming in our neighborhood, leading her to seek out multilingual educators. She continually adapted the program model in order to meet the growing demand for childcare. She advocated for inclusion, more accessibility to subsidized spaces, better pay and benefits for early childhood educators. These are just a small sample of the changes Cindy fought for. As you can imagine, it was not always an easy path or a clear one. But despite the challenges, Cindy managed to create and maintain a vibrant childcare community rooted in inclusivity and connection. The idea of connection is what I want to speak about today. This is something that was a driving force in Cindy's career and continues to motivate her even in her retirement. Many of the children who have attended Betty Hyde throughout the years have developed lasting friendships. Our graduates, as Isaac mentioned, often return to the school as teenagers to volunteer. Families who have moved to different parts of the world still keep in touch with us. These lasting connections are something that Cindy took her time and care to foster. The commitment to connection goes deeper than just forming lasting relationships, though. Cindy is a champion of so many initiatives to form bonds within the community and to connect and care for our neighborhood as a whole. As director, she was able to advise parents about the many wonderful neighborhood schools, such as Viscount Alexander, Franco Jeunesse, and Lady Evelyn. She's always taken great pride in her ability to encourage the Betty Hyde community to get involved and make the world a better place. For example, she made sure the Betty Hyde children participated in the Spring Cleaning in the Capital campaign each and every year, Armed with gloves, garbage bags, recycling bins, and a wagon, the Betty Hyde gang still heads out every spring to do their part in keeping the neighborhood tidy. And they pay particular attention and focus on the parks that we love and that we use so often. And this brings me to the reason why we're here today. The idea of renaming a park in Cindy's honor seems like a natural to me. This park in particular, being located kitty corner to the church where the school was located for so many years, is a place where all the Betty Hyde children have played, laughed, and learned. Countless Betty Hyde children have celebrated their preschool graduation in this very park. I think it's only fitting to name it after someone who has dedicated her career to the children who play there, the parents who gather there, and the neighborhood that surrounds it. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Janet, for joining us today and sharing that with us. Truly do appreciate it. Up next, we have Orest Zakadowski, who's up for 5 minutes. Welcome to the committee, Orest, and please go ahead. Mr. Coordinator, did we lose our witness there?
I did see him on quickly. Let me just check for you.
If it pleases the committee, we'll just give it just a minute so we can get our witness back. Mr. Zakadowski, can you hear us? There you are.
Hi, sorry, I don't know, I got kicked out.
No problem. No, please go ahead.
Okay,
No
thank
problem.
you. Well, thank you for allowing me to address this committee. My name is Orest Zakadowski. I'm a resident of Sandy Hill, and I live a couple of blocks away from the park that is being considered for renaming in honor of Cindy Mitchell. There are very few positive things that we as a neighborhood, a city, and a nation can take away from the COVID-19 pandemic. Many people have died, many have been ill, many livelihoods have been lost, futures put on hold or upended. These last 2 years have been a nightmare for too many. A couple of things, however, that the pandemic has shown us. It has made us all more cognizant of what is important in our lives and who the people are who protect and safeguard those important things and make sure that they work. We have been made more keenly aware of the importance of the things we used to consider commonplace or even mundane. The local grocery store or food bank when we're hungry, the hospital or clinic or doctor's office when we're sick, and the schools where our kids learn. The dedication and commitment of the workers who made these places that together make a community function has been made plain by the pandemic, and we as a community need to recognize their contribution. In my professional life, I work for the Ukrainian Canadian Congress, a federation of community organizations that represents the Ukrainian community in Canada. Every day I get to see firsthand and have the honor to work with so many people who, through a spirit of common purpose, unite together to improve the lived experiences of those around them. Though I don't know Ms. Mitchell personally, I have read about her work, directing Betty Hyde Cooperative Learning Center, working with refugees, supporting the food bank. These are the kinds of things whose importance was shown to us by the pandemic, and which I hope we won't take for granted anymore. Ms. Mitchell is, I think, an embodiment of essential workers, essential to the spirit of Sandy Hill and the community in which we all live. I hope this committee and this city sees fit to acknowledge her commitment to our community by renaming the park on Chapel Street in her honor, and in so doing, acknowledge the many contributions of so many people who have, through their good works, made the places we live better, kinder, and more compassionate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zakadowski. Thank you very much also for your work with the Congress, and Slava Ukraini. Any questions for our delegates and any questions to staff? I think we can safely say, is this item carried? Oh, sorry, Councillor Kavanaugh, please go ahead.
I just wanted to say thank you to all the delegates all together, as well as to Councillor Fleury for bringing this forward. I really appreciate seeing somebody so deserving as the liaison on women and gender equity. I really appreciate the effort of honoring somebody who's a very strong person in the community, happens to be a woman and is a community builder, and is in a profession that we don't normally honor, and which is a shame. And I appreciate that we are doing that, and it seems very appropriate. So I want to thank you, and I want to thank all the delegates for bringing this forward. And as has been stated, childcare is absolutely essential to our whole economy, our whole life as a community, and hopefully more people will be able to take advantage of it soon. But for those heroes who've been keeping it going for all these years, it's been, you know, a godsend to so many, and I appreciate that they're being honored. Thank you.
Hear, hear. Councillor Deans, please go ahead. Councillor Deans, we can't hear you.
Sorry.
Oh, no problem. Go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I don't know Cindy Mitchell. I wish I did, but I feel like I do after having listened to the presentations and the passion and the people's voices that spoke about Cindy today. And like Councillor Kavanaugh, I believe that it's important to recognize people that make major contributions in our communities and in professions that traditionally have not received the recognition that they so deserve. And I think Cindy Mitchell is among those. I know many early childhood educators from my own ward and the great work that they do in our communities, and how they have been traditionally undervalued. And I think that's very unfortunate, and hopefully that will change. My own daughter's an early childhood educator, and I see in her the passion and the belief that those early years are very, very important in shaping the lives of those young children to be positive and contributing adults to our society and our communities going forward. So I'm very, very happy to support this motion and recognize Cindy Mitchell. I do want to add, however, that this is in no way passing judgment on Sir Wilfrid Laurier, but I took the point that one of the presenters made that Sir Wilfrid Laurier, having served as Canada's 7th Prime Minister, has many recognitions. And so I think it's reasonable that Cindy Mitchell have the park in the community where she's made such an impact named after her. And it is for that reason that I wholeheartedly support the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Is this item carried? Carried. Wonderful.
Carried.
Thank you all to everyone who came out and gave those beautiful testimonials of the impact that Cindy Mitchell had on your life. We must continue to sing about our unsung heroes, our early childhood educators. This is a wonderful step in that direction. They have such an impact on our lives deep into our adulthood, and certainly in supporting us as you know, we try to navigate the world as parents as well. So thank you very much to everyone who came out, and especially to our ECEs that came to speak to the committee today. Our next item is item number 5, a commemorative naming proposal for the Pat Mcleod Community Stage. We are recommending that the Committee and Protective Services Committee recommend Council to approve the proposal to name the Parkdale Park Community Stage, located at 366 Parkdale Avenue in Kitchissippi Ward, Pat Mcleod Community Stage. This is supported by staff and the ward councillor. Is this item carried? Carried. Thank you. Carried. Item number 6. David Chantal Park, the Community and Protective Services Committee recommend Council approve the proposal to rename Tilbury Park, located at 725 Sherbourne Road in Kitchissippi as well, the David Chantal Park. Is this item carried? It is supported by staff and the ward councillor as well.
Carried.
Carried. Thank you, everyone. One final commemorative naming proposal for Jim Sioux Cricket Pitch that the Community and Protective Services Committee recommend Council approve the proposal to name the cricket pitch within Linda Lane Park located at 580 Smythe Road in Alta Vista Ward 18, this Jim Sioux Cricket Pitch. This is supported by staff and the ward councillor. Is this item carried?
Carried.
Carried. Thank you very much, everyone. We are now moving on to item number 8, the Respite Services Sustainability Plan. Donna Gray and Chris Tuck are on hand for a PowerPoint presentation. We have one motion from Councillor Fleury, 2 directions from Councillor Fleury, and those motions and directions are shared in the Councillor's SP and shared drive. And we have one delegation following the presentation. I'll turn things over to Donna Gray and Chris Tuck now.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. With me today to do the presentation on the Respite Center Sustainability Plan is Chris Tuck, who's the commander of our Human Needs Task Force in our command center. And joining him today is Rachel Ladisser, who has been the lead for this initiative and this project moving forward. I'd like to say a few opening remarks and take the opportunity as well to recognize many of the individuals in our community who I believe have really been the hidden heroes through the pandemic. For more than 2 years now, Chris and the Human Needs Task Force teams have demonstrated an unwavering commitment to support those who are most at risk in Ottawa and those who have been disproportionately affected during this pandemic. The services and the supports are and have been critical in this community. Supports like financial aid, food security, mental health and crisis supports, sheltering and supporting people experiencing homelessness, but actually creating, running, and managing both physical distancing centers and respite centers in our local communities. This has truly been a collaborative effort between all our city departments, Ottawa Public Health, Ottawa Police Services, and the community. But it has also, most importantly, laid the foundation for new innovative models of integrated service delivery for individuals in our community that have the most complex needs in our highest needs communities. Individuals, businesses, community leaders, nonprofit organizations, funders, private donors, community associations, and many other public sector partners have committed their time and resources to meet the important needs of residents in our communities. I want to specifically thank the community surrounding the respite centers and the physical distancing who have supported and engaged with us throughout this process. And I want to take a moment specifically to thank you as the Community and Protective Services Committee for supporting these emergency efforts to be initiated, and also to support and recognize and appreciate the efforts of the ward councillors, Councillor Leeper, Councillor McKinney, Councillor King, Councillor Fleury, and Councillor Cloutier for their support and engagement with the community on these services. I'd also like to take a moment to thank the staff in my department, the Community and Social Services Department, and most specifically as well, the staff who've been redeployed across the city from various city departments, including Recreation, Culture, and Facility Services, as well as the staff from the Centertown Community Health Center, Sandy Hill Community Health Center, Vanier Community Resource Center, Somerset West Community Health Center, Wabino, and the Ottawa Inner City Health Team under the leadership of Wendy Muckle. I would also like to acknowledge the leadership and support of Nani Cloutier and Don Lyons from Somerset West, who have been true advocates to a different way of working in the community to support those in the highest needs. All of these staff have worked incredibly hard to create a safe and welcoming space for clients. They were coming from different organizational backgrounds, professionals' experiences, and cultures, but they managed to pull together as a team and build a positive experience for clients. They have done and continue to do remarkable work. I would also like to take the opportunity to appreciate the shelter providers who have persevered relentlessly during this pandemic to keep our congregate care settings free and contained of COVID, and thus protecting our broader community. But at the same time as they've been doing that, they have been transforming their service delivery models and are moving to create much needed supportive housing in our communities across the city starting this year. Specifically, I'd like to thank and appreciate the efforts of Deirdre from Shepherds of Good Hope, Peter Tilley from the Ottawa Mission, Tyler Fainstaff from John Howard Society, Mark Prevost from the Salvation Army, Sarah Davis from the Cornerstone Housing for Women, and Joanne Lowe from the Youth Services Bureau. I am extremely grateful for their contributions, professionalism, and dedication collectively to those in need. This whole of community commitment to go above and beyond and remove barriers to service has made and continues to make an incredible difference in the lives of individuals. Approval today of these recommendations will ensure that the social service sector can continue this whole of community approach to sustain these much needed services while we thoughtfully and incrementally transition out of our emergency response with an ultimate gradual closure of physical distancing centers. Staff are proposing to leverage the lessons we have learned at the temporary respite centers by implementing the integrated social and health services in our communities with the greatest needs. Staff are asking committee to approve today the first creation of the city's first community-based social service hub at 370 Catherine Street, and to approve the planning for the expansion of these services as a similar hub in Vanier. And because the work that we do is so integrated with many of our community partners, we'd like to continue to work and fund with these community agencies for the balance of the year to define these models moving forward, but to also maintain much needed services like day programs so that they continue to meet the safety requirements of Ottawa Public Health. Overall, these recommendations today will also help us move towards achieving the strategic goals that exist in our 10-year housing and homelessness plan. While we have been in emergency response, we have not lost sight of that plan and continuing to move that forward. The people that we want to ensure in this system get the services that they need, and that we work together to ensure that the entire client experience across all the housing system is ultimately improved. So I appreciate your time today, and I'll hand the presentation over to Chris. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Mr. Chair and committee members, the plan and presentation we have prepared for you will provide, oh, sorry, you can have the next slide, please. The plan and presentation we have prepared for you will provide recommendations that, if approved, will sustain the continuity of key successful services in the community required to support the community and social services response to COVID-19 and support the recovery planning required to gradually transition services, as Donna mentioned, thoughtfully, incrementally back to the community in 2022. Next slide, please. Outlined here is an overview of the key initiatives that were very successful in mitigating the service impacts and supporting the needs experienced by our most at-risk residents as a result of COVID-19. As you may recall, these important and successful interventions were needed to support the unprecedented situation caused by the pandemic. And we know that these interventions likely save lives of some of the most at-risk people in our community, such as those experiencing homelessness. We are very appreciative to the province for their support throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. Through the support of the province, the city has received a total of $89 million in provincial social services relief funding. These funds have been used to offset the social cost the pandemic has had, disproportionately on the city's most at risk, and it is set to expire. The funding received to date has been provided to community agencies targeting mental health, Indigenous services, priority neighborhoods, youth, newcomers, racialized individuals, food security, as well as housing and homelessness services. More than 87 community agencies have received social services relief funding to assist in maintaining and enhancing their essential services, such as expanding their hours of operation, supporting infection control measures, PPE requirements, and increasing their capacity to provide mental health services and outreach. Throughout the pandemic, the department has used a portion of the funding it has received to further support the social services system with outreach, respite centers, physical distancing and isolation centers, along with wraparound services to support those individuals. These initiatives were able to be implemented due to the provincial emergency funding provided. To date, these various initiatives, such as the respite centers, have been very successful in assuring a continuity of services in the community, the value of integrating social and health services in communities with the greatest need, and they have helped address emerging community needs along with the mitigating the spread of COVID-19. The Community and Social Services Department Housing Services has continued to keep an eye on the sustainability of the social service sector as we move past the pandemic. As a result of 80 million investment by all levels of government in 2022, 142 new supportive housing units will be completed, with an additional 94 supportive housing units expected to be completed within the next 2 years. This will create 235 permanent housing options in our community by 2024. Other important highlights include a $390,000 investment in 2021-2022 for rapid housing initiatives to support women moving from community shelter into permanent housing, and a $300,000 allocation to support community renovations for bathrooms, showers, and laundry facilities. The following summary and recommendations, if approved, will allow us to maintain that success as we continue to manage and recover and allow for a gradual transition from our emergency response this year. Next slide, please. For this sector and in the congregate care settings such as community shelters, the reality is the COVID risk continues, and they remain high-risk settings despite the lifting of some of the COVID-19 public health measures. Further public health restrictions are tentatively scheduled to be adjusted and or lifted on April 27th. With the lifting of restrictions, public health is expecting an increase in positive cases with the extent not yet known. Regardless, while many of the restrictions in the broader community are being lifted within congregate care settings such as community shelters, continued measures to protect against COVID and other respiratory diseases will be needed to protect our most at-risk residents. Over the past 2 years, our most at-risk residents and services have been greatly impacted by the pandemic. Similar to the many other sectors, our community partners are tired with significant resource and staffing challenges. They have suffered a significant impact due to the pandemic, and it will take a longer time to recover than other sectors. These important services remain crucial in supporting our most at-risk residents as we continue with our service recovery planning. This recovery and transition planning is a collaborative approach with our community partners that will support a safe transition of services in collaboration with public health and look to implement more longer-term sustainable solutions. We have worked collaboratively with the Financial Services Department to identify funding strategies to respond to the funding need as outlined in this report, if the social services funding expected is not received or sufficient. Next slide, please. Today, we are reviewing a series of recommendations for the sustainability of the respite centers and community day programs for 2022 that totals $2.6 million, as well as a recommendation for the continuation of the physically distancing centers in 2022 that totals $8.3 million. That, and along with the Human Needs Command Center administrative costs for a total of $13.6 million. Next slide, please. As you may recall, due to the state of the emergency, many of the essential services programs were temporarily shut down or altered to comply with COVID-19 public health guidelines. As such, residents in need found themselves without access to basic needs, such as food, washrooms and showers, on-site support, and a safe place to rest. As a result, the Mcleod Respite Center opened in Centertown in April of 2020, but later closed in late fall as the facility was not properly heated. The Mcleod Respite Center was branded a success and a much needed temporary solution to support our at-risk residents and provide temporary relief to community agencies impacted by the pandemic. The center quickly highlighted the increasing service gaps and challenges being experienced by agencies and impacts on those experiencing homelessness, precariously housed, and or individuals living on low income who are being disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. As a result, additional temporary respite centers in the Lower Town, Vanier, and Centertown area were open to maintain much needed respite services during the pandemic. Currently, the respite centers average attendance for Tom Brown and Bernard Metra is 115 per day. Meal service transition had an impact on attendance, which I will illustrate in the next slide. Based on a survey conducted in September with clients who are accessing the respite services, some key results include that 63% declare residing in Centertown or the Vanier area, 42% declare living in subsidized housing, rooming houses, or community shelters, and 9% indicated sleeping rough. Next slide, please. As you can see in 2021, there was a downward trend as we moved along the pandemic journey in navigating various waves and weather and changes to public health restrictions. Downward trend includes work of other day programs, services increasing, and the transition of meals in September back to the community. Meal service has transitioned to community partners, but the respite centers continue to accept food donations. The current data show a combined average attendance of 115 residents visits daily, with approximately 2,000 monthly visits as of February. The numbers reflect the sustained need we are seeing in the community that will continue to benefit from the integrated hub and wraparound services provided at the respite centers, which these recommendations, if approved, will help support. Some other highlights for the respite centers in 2021 include that 55% of the visits were at Tom Brown, 33% of the visits were at Bernard-Grametra, and 12% at the St. Paul's Eastern United. Most access services were food, showers, and bathrooms, and a safe place to rest. Next slide, please. Social services relief funding helped agencies function, stabilize, and enhance their services such as extended hours, increased staffing, and support services to help address the impacts of the pandemic, with the temporary respite centers as an extension of the existing day program supports. As the social services relief funding is set to expire, the challenge in this uncertain and evolving period will be to maintain and stabilize operations of these additional supports until the end of the year. Any lack of sufficient funding may result in a decrease in services provided. Alongside the implementation of the social services hub model and the ongoing recovery planning, we will continue to build on the collaboration and partnership realized through the Human Needs Task Force. And the department will continue to work with agencies offering day programs and related services to identify opportunities to better address the needs of our most at-risk residents who continue to feel the impact of the pandemic as we move forward. Next slide, please. We established a respite center transition working group in August of 2021 and brought together both internal and external stakeholders to discuss the COVID recovery and transition planning for the temporary respite centers. This consultation included meetings, surveys, and individual interviews, and continues to help inform our understanding of the current state and needs in service and potential mitigation strategies to help inform the recovery plan. This slide provides an overview of the key highlights from those ongoing consultations and includes feedback such as the need for more extended hours during evenings and weekends and more services outside the downtown core. Some of the day programs, extended hours in evenings and weekends, are currently funded through the Social Services Relief Fund and are expected to end with the funding. Other highlights include the positive impact of having hub space with coordinated access to services and the ongoing collaborative approach between the city and the community partners to ensure service availability. Next slide, please. This recommendation maintains respite center service, which includes the use of Tom Brown, while planning for the implementation of the service hub model is underway for 370 Catherine Street at the end of July. The expected cost to maintain Tom Brown Respite Center until July 2022 is $260,000 for 4 months, of April to July. The operating cost of the service hub at 370 Catherine Street will be assumed by the Employment and Social Services budget and therefore have less financial implications and offers an immediate and sustainable service offering for the community. The service offerings will include a client-centered wraparound approach that builds on the successful model of the respite centers. The recommendation also includes maintaining respite center services at Bernard-Grametra and in that particular area for the remaining of the year, while working with recreation, culture, and facility services and community partners to explore longer-term strategies and locations in the Vanier area to support a service hub model. To maintain respite services at Bernard-Grametra, there is an expected cost of $437,000 from April to December 2022. Next slide, please. Alongside the recommendation to maintain respite center services, this recommendation highlights the ongoing need to support and maintain additional funding to day program and related services at this time and has an expected cost of $1.9 million for 2022. As well, as we move forward, we'll be looking at the existing yearly sustainability funding of $7 million to determine if there's any gaps in services and how best to mitigate those gaps. This will include working with the sector to come up with longer-term solutions. This recognizes that individuals who are utilizing respite and day programming services have complex needs that require a coordinated and integrated approach. Therefore, this recommendation, if approved, supports us working towards an improved model of service that includes a wraparound client-centered approach. Next slide, please. Since the beginning of the pandemic, the department has worked closely with community shelter providers and collaborated to address emerging needs, including resource issues, public health measures, and capacity while managing outbreaks in their settings. Through ongoing consultation, community shelter providers have expressed concern with the ongoing challenges with appropriate physical distancing and other measures as recommended by public health to mitigate future outbreaks. Ongoing overcrowding risk and limited capacity to support the ongoing need for services, and the future transition and closure of the temporary physical distancing centers and the potential lack of capacity within the shelters to support future outbreaks, public health measures, and the ongoing need for services and individuals requiring increased level of support. Next slide, please. The Dempsey Physical Distancing Center for Women and the Nicholas Physical Distancing Center for Men were set up as temporary initiatives to support public health measures and efforts in reducing the overall capacity within the single adult community shelter system and provide adequate space for users to physically distance and mitigate the spread of COVID-19. During the pandemic, without the physical distancing centers, those experiencing homelessness would have limited options and would have included staying in an overcrowded environment where the risk of getting sick or worse from COVID-19 would be high. The overall number of individuals requiring shelter services has been stable the past 2 years, and currently we have approximately 25% of community shelter residents staying at the physical distancing centers. The temporary physical distancing centers have been successful in supporting the overall health and safety of the sector and minimizing the spread of COVID-19, and therefore requires planning to support the recovery efforts for the community shelter system, which has been disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. Due to the ongoing length of the pandemic and needs of residents, a wraparound case management approach with a focus on housing is part of the services provided at the physical distancing centers. To date, over 100 residents at the centers have been supported in securing permanent housing. Next slide, please. For these reasons, this recommendation outlined in the report looks for the continuation of the physical distancing centers to provide support to the community shelters who remain at high risk for COVID-19 outbreaks in order to ensure this sector continues to be stable. As well, the recovery planning includes the goal to transition the Ruche Isolation Center back to the community facility in 2022. The ability to use this location to support public health measures as part of the outbreak management strategies of isolating individuals with COVID-19 under the care of Ottawa Intercity Health has had a very positive impact on mitigating the spread of COVID-19 within the community shelters and ensured a continuity of care to those residents most at risk at a crucial time. This recommendation will also allow for the review and planning needed to support the work for more sustainable long-term solutions. This information and future budget requests will be provided by Q4 of this year. Next slide, please. This slide provides an overview of the financial implications for the recommendations that have been reviewed today and as outlined in the report. As noted previously, pending additional details on future social services relief funding recently announced by the province, we have worked with the Financial Services Department to confirm a strategy to cover the financial impact of our response and transition efforts in 2022 as part of the plan provided in the report. Next slide, please. The next steps outlined here highlight our goal to be flexible and adaptable with our approach to meet the needs of the community in collaboration with our partners as we continue with our transition and long-term sustainability planning that incorporate the important lessons learned due to COVID-19 with the goal to sustain and improve the services and supports to those most at risk in our community. In closing, I would like to thank community members, stakeholders, and staff who have provided input to date on the report and their ongoing response efforts supporting our most at-risk residents. We look forward to continuing this work and the ongoing dialogue with you all. I would also like to acknowledge and thank Donna Gray, my colleagues, and my team who have been instrumental in the work in supporting the Human Needs Task Force and the Command Center and their commitment and work on this report. Thank you.
Chris, you and your team, along with Donna and her team as well, have done an excellent job throughout this pandemic with the Human Needs Task Force and with all of this work on the respite centers and day programs. You know, on behalf of all of us, thank you for your care when dealing with our most vulnerable throughout this very difficult time. You've done an incredible job and we appreciate your hard work so much. Before we move on to our one delegation, we do have a motion from Councillor Fleury in two directions. I'd like to get them on the floor just in case the delegation wishes to speak to them. So Councillor Fleury, if you would, if you want to go ahead and do your directions, we can, you know, I believe staff support them, so we can get those out of the way and get them in motion, and then your motion, which we'll vote on prior to the report. So please go ahead, Councillor Fleury, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. And I wonder if Kelly could put it on screen. And yes, I did work with and updated the motion with discussions with Donna Gray last afternoon. So thank you for that. So okay, so the first direction is, as recommendation number 1B outlines a long-term planning for single adult community shelter requirements, and given that bylaw 2008-341 limits the maximum number of permitted shelters in Ward 12 to 4, that staff be directed to provide the ward councillor an update prior to July 1st, 2022 on the transition plan for the closure of Nicholas Physical Distancing Center, with a focus on the transition to permanent housing for these clients.
Donna, you're prepared to take that as direction?
Yes, I am, Mr. Chair.
Okay, wonderful. And you have a second direction, Councillor Fleury?
I do. Okay, so here it is. In response to staff recommendations to developing a service hub for the Vanier area in consultation with internal external stakeholders, recommendation number 1C, that staff provide further details to the Ward 12 and Ward 13 councillors on the community consultation and governance structures that will be used to inform these service plans and future hubs. These details should include, but are not limited to, internal stakeholders that will be consulted, external stakeholders that will be consulted, the inclusion of community health partners, public health, Wabano, the Vanier Community and Resource Center, the Rideau Rockcliffe Resource Center, the governance structure that will be put in place for the operation of the future hub. So just a bit of early planning on staff's recommendation, Chair.
And Ms. Gray, you are prepared to take this as direction as well?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I am.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. And Councillor Fleury, you have a motion as well. We'd like to get that on the floor if you would please go ahead.
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you, Chair. So whereas the Respite Service Sustainability Plan provides a plan for the city-owned recreation spaces to transition out of the respite use and back into recreational use, whereas a need was identified to return Tom Brown Arena to recreational use, whereas since March 2020, the Hutsi Community Center has been used for COVID-19 pandemic response use, including being used as an isolation center, leaving the Lower Town community its key community hub. Whereas Lower Town is one of the lowest income communities in Ottawa and among the communities with the least recreation spaces in Ottawa, whereas the Community and Social Services Department have begun working with Ottawa Public Health to transition the isolation center out of the Hutsi Community Center. Therefore, be it resolved that staff update the ward councillor on the transition timeline for Hutsi Community Center on an ongoing basis, and be it further resolved that Recreation, Culture, and Facility Services, alongside CSSD's transition timeline, plan for the return of on-site programming at Hutsi Community Center as soon as possible, but no later than September 2022.
And Don, I'll give you just a brief moment to comment on that very quickly before we move on to our delegations. You okay with everything in this motion?
Yes, I am, Mr. Chair.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you very much for your collaboration with staff on this one, Councillor Fleury. I know that you did a lot of work on it, so just my sincere appreciation and preparation for committee today. Thank you so much for that work. We do have one delegation in attendance on this item. We have Don Lyons, who is the wonderful Director of Family and Community Health and Harm Reduction at Somerset West Community Health Centre. Welcome to the committee. Looking forward to your presentation. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. So I'm here on behalf of Somerset West Community Health Centre to express really our heartfelt thanks to the City of Ottawa for their leadership in establishing respite centres as part of the pandemic response. As both Donna and Chris shared during their comments, the purpose of the respite centres was to provide the city's most marginalised residents with a place to take refuge from the weather, to meet basic needs, to obtain social supports, and to get connected with health and social services. The centers provided this and so much more. The respite centers have been a fantastic example of collaboration between the city and community organizations. And there were many organizations, as Donna spoke to, that supported their operations, including Centretown, Somerset West, and Sandy Hill Community Health Centers, Vanier Community Resource Center, Wabano Center, and Inner City Health. Under the city's leadership, including two fantastic on-site supervisors, Kim Stephen and Chrissy May, staff from diverse backgrounds came together to create a welcoming space for individuals who quite literally had nowhere else to go. The centers were open during a time when many other services were either closed or had to significantly reduce capacity because of COVID. Coupled with the fact that many public spaces were inaccessible, the respite centers became one of the few spaces that homeless and precariously housed individuals could gather. Partnerships with local businesses and with food security organizations like Parkdale Food Center meant that the respite centers were able to provide food and even hot meals for a period of time. In addition, when the city's shelters became overwhelmed, the respite centers pivoted to provide overnight services. As we transition out of the emergency response phase of the pandemic, we're encouraged to see that the city is exploring long-term solutions to the systemic issues that have become even more pronounced over the last 2 years. The compounding impact of the opioid crisis, worsening mental health, and lack of access to affordable housing means that our most marginalized residents will face disproportionate barriers in recovering from the pandemic. These individuals need ongoing support to address immediate basic needs, as well as longer-term stability, which must include greater access to affordable housing. They also need ongoing drop-in and respite services, especially in parts of the city that have fewer supports for these populations. We're therefore really pleased to hear about the recommendations to establish social service hubs, which I understand will include drop-in capacity in both Centertown and Vanier. We're also pleased to hear about the recommendations to support community agencies, including day centers and community health and resource centers, to extend hours and increase staffing to address these significant and ongoing needs. The last several years, as we all know, have been incredibly challenging, but there have been some silver linings. And one of those silver linings is the way that we've been able to come together across sectors to respond to the needs of those who've been made vulnerable by systemic barriers. The respite centers are a great example of this coming together, and we're very hopeful that the lessons learned from this important initiative will not be lost. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate you coming out and giving us your point of view on this today. Truly appreciate that. We have Councillor McKinney from Somerset Ward who would like to speak now. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to take a very quick moment to thank you, Dawn, for coming out and just to recognize the work that our community and health and resource centers did throughout the pandemic, the work that they did in line with our staff as well, the Human Needs Task Force, as you mentioned, recreation staff who mostly staff those respite centers. Certainly, we were leaving marginalized people in our community always get, well, that's why they're marginalized. They're always pushed to the margins. Sorry, my dog's gonna bark. I can't believe it. But just to recognize the work that you did, Somerset West was the first center to call me up when there were no respite, when we were all scrambling. It was brand new and asked for something open close by. We looked at Plant, we ended up at Mcleod. But I do want to recognize the work that you did and the way that you continually bring to our attention the needs in our community that can often be forgotten. It's easy when you don't see it, and these are people without voices and often also are not appreciated in our community. So I do thank you and look forward to continuing the work that we've done. And thank you to staff as well. I will make some comment later on that. Thanks, Don.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Kavanagh, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Don. I really appreciate the feedback. I knew from the start the Human Needs Task Force was something that had to be invented, and because it was breaking down silos and working with our partners, and it's done a lot of good. It's unfortunate that these things come out of difficult times, but they're great ideas, and I appreciate the fact that we're moving forward. So your feedback is really important to me. I think to our council to hear what's working. I don't know if you have any comments, but as the liaison on women and gender equity, I don't know if you want to comment on how that works for women. As I realize that a lot of it is more geared towards men, and we have facilities for women, but I just wanted to get your comments. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Appreciate that. I'm not good at retaining data in my head, so I don't know the breakdown in terms of, women versus men versus other genders accessing the respite centers. But I certainly know that, in the anecdotal information I have, there were certainly women accessing, and efforts, for example, to find women safe spaces to sleep, which sometimes is even a greater barrier than for men. So they were among the population that was served for sure. Don't know the breakdown exactly.
Oh yeah, no, we have it. We have that breakdown. It's there in the report. So so appreciated. Just wanted to get your feedback overall of how it's working, but thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Questions to staff, please. Councillor McKenney.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to quickly thank staff, Donna and her entire team. I do take, we certainly did early in the pandemic, as we, all went home, locked our doors and hunkered down, and then realized we had left a lot of people outside who just had nowhere to go and were exceptionally unsafe. And to have Mcleod open was such a point of pride in the community that I represent. It was welcomed by the community. There were chalk drawings on day one. People were there to welcome people into the center, and this was to provide people who had absolutely nowhere to go to a washroom all day long. Nowhere to get a shower, nowhere to wash their clothes. Like they were, they were just, that was the consequence of not having a respite center. But then the respite centers went beyond that. Mcleod is, as Dawn just mentioned, we had mostly recreation staff who came in and staffed it. And I heard from many of them that it changed their lives. They, they have a whole new appreciation for people in our community, and Kim and Chrissy and that whole gang at Mcleod, who then transferred over to Tom Brown, brought more than just washrooms and showers and washing machines to these folks. It was bringing services to them, talking to them, understanding. And I think this is the most important thing. And this is what Donna and I have had conversations about. Here we are today. It's just so, so welcoming to have this hub on Catherine open, because what it allowed staff to do was understand for people who are in our community who are unhoused. Sometimes they're in rooming houses, but they are still unhoused. They bunk in rooming houses. They don't have the key to the room. It is not really their room. They are as homeless as somebody in a shelter, or they're sleeping outside. And what the respite centers have allowed to have happen is that staff who meet with these same people every day, they come in, is to understand their unique needs, who they really are. They're not just a number. They're not just one of 1,900 people who slept at a shelter on a certain night. You know, they are unique people. Some have lost their jobs because, you know, they were injured and now have addictions, and have lost their jobs. Some have lost their homes through a family breakdown, some through violence in their homes, some kids who aged out of care. So all of these unique people came into the respite centers every day, and our staff got to know who they were, and they were able to respond to that. And the stories I heard of, you know, staff connecting some of our residents to their family, back to their family, helping them get to their family, helping to understand whether they were attached to housing workers. So when you're out there, you don't know. You don't know what's available. You don't know how to navigate the system. Can be very difficult. And I'll always remember a video that I saw, and it was actually at Tom Brown. It was a Friday afternoon, and they were closing up, and they were all doing the YMCA together. And it well, first off, brought back memories to gay bars I used to go to when I was younger, because YMCA is one of those like iconic like gay songs, and I was like, that is amazing. It is amazing that this whole group of people who in the past would not have known how to interact. I've heard that from recreation staff. They've said, you know, in the past, somebody came in and they weren't really behaving, we might call security, but not anymore. Now we know who people are, we know what their needs are. So that happened, you know, and to have that ongoing space where we can continue to understand what it is that people need in our community, people who are marginalized. I think that's a gift to us. And so I thank our staff for that, but also to have, you know, people, residents who are unhoused, able to go into this hub is a gift to them. But I have to just end by saying it still is housing. It's mental health services, it's support services, and it's housing. And our federal and provincial governments continue to fail us. Every single day, we are not getting the funding that we need to house people, to give them the supports they need. We've got supportive housing in this community, in this city. We know how it works, and it's not happening. And an overwhelming proportion of people who are, disproportionate portion of people who are homeless are Indigenous. And if there's one thing we can do for reconciliation is to house our Indigenous residents who find themselves homeless here on their unceded and unsurrendered land. So I just want to end there and thank you to staff. Thank you for coming to this place where we recognize just what that specialized hub can do for people who absolutely need it the most. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor. I know that staff feel your support on this one. Thanks so much for your collaboration and advocacy on this. It's certainly enhanced the services that are available, and truly do appreciate everything that you've done. Councillor Fleury.
Thank you, Chair, and I too want to thank staff and build on what Councillor McKinney was expressing and saying. I've certainly seen firsthand, and the team members on the ground were quite effective in sharing with us the stories of St. Paul's Eastern and Bernard-Grandmaite, which in a period where we were all behind computers was quite helpful to see what, you know, some of the struggles. I also want, and we could thank a number of partners, but I do want to extend, because it's in the social services realm, the work that Donna and her team have done, particularly with food services for the Ottawa Mission. The Ottawa Mission through the last 2 years have really pushed their food truck, which has brought warm food into communities. And I know one of the points that, I don't know if it's Donna or Chris made earlier about there are services needed outside of the traditional core, which I think the food truck, the Mission food truck is really starting to capture and respond to. So a number of examples, we could go on and on all day. Donna, I question to you, I guess there are 2-3 segments in your report. It's a big report. There's a lot of components to it and it's fulsome, so we appreciate it. Will there be, I mean, we use the term lessons learned, but I don't like that term. I think it's maybe too traditional, but we've learned a lot through the pandemic, and there are obvious things that that you are doing for your teams to be more resilient in the future. Catherine Street being an example, the example of Vanier. Could you maybe express what, like, are we coming to see social services back in communities, back on the ground? Is that the trend that you're expressing through today's report?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Councillor Fleury. Yes, that is the trend that we're actually seeing as a strategic direction moving forward for the social services department. It's something that we started, even pre-pandemic as a direction, but really the pandemic just escalated it and really just kind of dove us into those communities to respond. But what we have been doing throughout the pandemic as part of our emergency management responses, we have been doing lessons learned at each stage. As we got through a phase, we did lessons learned, we adapted, we changed our delivery. We've been adapting each time, and we will be doing that as we plan right now over the course of the summer. We're going to be doing that work with our community partners too, and we, in partnership with Ottawa Public Health, trying to understand the broad implications of COVID on the community and what will be the needs moving forward. And then how do our services need to adapt and think about the delivery mechanisms that are going to meet the needs of the community. So we see that as the precursor to our next term of council, really for Community and Social Services Department, our next iteration of what we think will be the priorities moving forward, with a whole approach that we want to allow the community to be driving solutions. We want to be responsive to the needs of the community, particularly equity, deserving groups and populations. And we want to be able to look at new models that the province is initiating and really maximize those models to the benefit of our local communities.
Yeah, it's and thank you for saying it as clearly as you've done. I mean, I've met with social services staff on the ground who are excited to now that the connections have been created over the last, or recreated over the last 2 years, and now the question is sustainability as the report, the part of the report in front of us. I see extreme opportunities, or very unique opportunities, to strengthen the partnerships in the social services, recreation, and public health realm. I think we're challenged for space, certainly, but I think there are unique opportunities in this window to continue and really imagine the future of what those services look like, and the partnerships, even within city services. So I hope we continue to do that. Maybe on a secondary aspect, which is one of the lessons learned, and we learned it the hard way, was some of the lack of resiliency within our shelter system, and it became a question of spaces, as we know the way the virus spreads. And I'm curious to hear from you where we're landing on that, like in terms of capacity for our shelters, in terms of future shelters, like, and I'll I always like the numbers, and you're used to that with me. When I look at the number provided today, like the 8.6 million for 9 months for 200 beds, I did quick math, and it gives us about per bed around just under 5,000 a month. I think it's 4,800, and you can appreciate, you and I relate on the data, and data should drive decision making and so on. I'm curious, we responded quickly to put in those systems in place, but for the long term, what could we do to build more resiliency if and when there are these types of situations? Because we're expanding a lot, or it appears as we are, but we had to do it. So I'm interested to hear from you, your perspective. I don't question the decisions, frankly. That's not my point here, but more around the recognition of challenges of resiliency, and how can we plan better if this does happen again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll say a few words and then I'll hand it to Saeed to provide more details. But I think one of the fundamental things we learned through the pandemic was the overcrowding in the existing shelter system that we're seeing now as a result of the physical distancing, you know, benefits of that. We can't go back to that degree of crowding in our shelter system, both from a public health perspective, but also from a risk and safety issue. So what we are looking at as well, we can transition some individuals back into existing capacity into the shelter system. We need to look at the long-term plan of what we do in the community. And that's a combination of looking at the demographics and the needs of individuals that we're seeing and what are better solutions that we need. We know supportive housing has been, and we have a good solid plan for supportive housing, but it's looking at that entire group of individuals experiencing homelessness, but also trying to tackle, and this is an important piece that's a change in direction for us, and it's a core piece of the community safety and well-being plan, and the work we need to do as a department is getting to preventative measures that are stopping people from entering into homelessness. So it's got to be, and you know, some of the work that we'll do will be short-term around the immediate transition out of these sites, but then a longer-term plan for what we do around emergency sheltering, but also the specific individuals and populations that are using the shelters and looking at different solutions to move them into housing, move them into some form of permanency in their residence. I don't know, Saeed, if you wanted to add to that.
Okay, thank you, Donna. Yes, Councillor, with respect to the shelter specifically, they've been one of our key partners in the delivery and addition of new supportive housing units in the city. We're working with, you know, mainly the Ottawa Mission, Cornerstone Housing for Women, Shepherds of Good Hope. We've got, you know, we're growing a substantial supportive housing network with them. And as you heard Chris and Donna mention, you know, a lot of the issues are about space and overcrowding. The shelter system, you know, we have not invested in it over the last, you know, couple of decades or even longer. So, you know, for example, 216 Murray, which we discussed, having the supportive housing with Shepherds of Good Hope, you know, our intention is to free up some of those beds so that they could have more space within the shelter and improve their capacity. But the sector continues to grow, and we work with them on their visioning and strategic planning so that they will become, you know, or they are already strong organizations, but they become stronger, and they can provide very effective services to vulnerable people in the city.
Thank you, Saeed, and thank you, Donna, for the response. Thank you, Chair, for that. To me, there are a number of initiatives this year that I continue to hope move forward, which can help build resiliency. Donna, you're aware of, and it's in the team members' work plan around head leases, and I know that Charmaine's team's working on rent evictions, and I know both of your team with infrastructure is working on the LRT phase 2 lands and so on. So I think all of these initiatives can also, if done right with the right supportive housing investments, can also bring strong resiliency. So I know we're looking at one aspect today, which is a response, but when we look forward, I think there are unique opportunities in front of us with the work plan that this committee and council has approved. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fleury. Councillor Kavanagh, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to staff for this report. I really appreciate the fact that we're putting the gender lens on this, and that was a part of the report, as well as the intersectionality that is something that is great to see going forward and very appropriate. I realize that you know, there's a larger number of men that are looking at that are in need of this, but there's certainly a lot of women as well. And one of the aspects that keeps coming up is that for women, homelessness is in sometimes 2 lanes. Some of it is coming from violence against women, domestic violence, fleeing, as well as just women who are homeless. And and I know that those have been in 2 different streams, but sometimes they overlap quite a bit. And I wonder what kind of conversations we need to have going forward about bringing this together so that we can serve these populations, because they're, unfortunately, it's very significant and possibly growing, especially after the pandemic.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, you know, we have seen, and that's one of the impacts of the pandemic, right, is increasing violence against women and we're seeing that pressure in the shelter system. And even though they're two separate groups, you know, the housing services has a very strong relationship with the violence against women sector in terms of housing and placement and overflow and supports to that. You know, there is more that we can do and more that we can do to strengthen that as we move forward. And definitely, you know, as part of our housing and homelessness plan and our advocacy efforts is also to advocate for additional beds for violence against women placement, so that the overflow in the city is minimized, and that the supports and the wraparound supports is provided by the experts in that field and that line of business. And so those will be efforts that will be working forward as we're looking at our longer term plan around the shelters as well.
I'm glad to hear that. I really appreciate that. Unfortunately, numbers aren't going down. And one thing we're discovering is that homelessness can be anywhere. I get reports of people coming to people's doors saying they're homeless and looking for handouts door to door in Bay Ward. It's not just downtown. It's not, you know, we're not saying that we need a shelter here, but it's obviously everywhere, and that's a concern. One little glitch that I came across, and I don't know what your comments are, is for a homeless person who is looking to use the respite center, is if they have an animal, a dog, which I came across, and that was I don't think it's unusual. I think that actually happens from time to time. I don't know how that's handled with the respite centers, the day centers.
I'll ask Chris to respond to that, because that team's been extremely creative and resourceful in addressing that need in the sector.
Thank you, Donna. Thank you, Chair. And thank you for your question, Councillor. Yeah, just to build on what Donna said, the respite centers are extremely flexible, and yes, pets are, we don't turn away people with a pet like a dog that comes in. We try to support them, even if they don't want to come in. We support them at the door, or even just for a short few minutes, and then obviously encourage them to continue to use the services. But yes, the pets are, you know, if they're on leash and they're etc., then obviously, you know, we adjust our service delivery model to make sure that the person gets the support they need.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate the programs, and I appreciate the cooperation with our homeless shelters, particularly Cornerstone, who I know that they're working. The ultimate goal is to have more supported units for them to live in, and in the long term. And I appreciate the work that is going forward on that. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your questions and comments. Vice Chair Eglai, please go ahead.
Thank you. So I have a question, hopefully just a clarification around Councillor Fleury's motion, and I'm going to direct it to Donna, because my understanding is that Donna and her team worked on the motion with Councillor Fleury. As I read the motion, it seems to me that September is sort of a drop dead date for transition. And I guess my question to you is, September in COVID time is a long way off, and a lot of different things could happen. We're hearing it's seasonal. If it's seasonal, then we may see an uptick again in the fall. So I guess my question is, what provisions are in place should we, and hopefully this isn't the case, but should we be in a situation where numbers are going up again? So what do we still go ahead and transition out that location? Or do we have an alternative plan in place to deal with people that still may very much need the service?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I can understand, Councillor Aguilar, why you'd be concerned in your role as a Board of Health and what we're seeing, you know, in rising cases right now. And we have been looking at mitigation approaches and strategies with Ottawa Inner City Health, who in consultation with Ottawa Public Health has really been guiding us in terms of our immediate response. What we are seeing is that we need to be thinking and building longer term solutions around what happens in a shelter system as we start to have isolation needs, not just, you know, with this wave, but alternate waves that we see are going to come. And so we are looking at mobile services, we're looking at the capacity in shelters, we're looking at really a variety of different techniques and strategies to really effectively live with COVID in the shelter system. We can never anticipate, and you know that, that what we're gonna experience and what's gonna come at us. This is our best laid plan with mitigations in place. We will leave open the requirement to come back to committee and council should we need to take a facility again and need to respond. Our hope and desire and what we're signaling to that community that is not our intent, but we would come back if it's an absolute emergency situation and we have no other options. But we are trying to build a sustainable plan for long-term solutions with the congregate care for future waves of COVID or other variants.
Well, and thank you for that. I just wanted to make sure that by voting on this today, we're not closing that door come the fall if there are people there who need the service because of the situation of the virus in the community at that time. So you're reassuring me that that's not the case. You have a transition mobile unit type approach you're looking at, and if worse comes to worse, the door is still open to come back to council and say, we need this location again. We need to set up a respite center again. So if that's the case, then I'm happy to support the motion. I just wanted to make sure that those protections were still in place for people who need the service. So thank you for that.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone, for the good discussion on this item today. And thank you again to staff for your incredible hard work. I know that this is a collaboration between many of your departments, Donna. So well done to Chris, Saeed, Donna, and all of your teams. You've done a wonderful job with this. Thank you. On the motion, is the motion carried?
Carried.
Carried. Excellent. And is the report carried as well, as amended?
Carried. Yeah, that includes the direction, Chair?
Correct. Yes.
Carried. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, we have two last items here. Carol will be on hand should you have any questions. The first being appointments to the Accessibility Advisory Committee, and I'll make a brief comment to say thank you to our members that have served over the course of this term and had to leave due to job commitments and other commitments. We appreciate your contribution, as I outlined in the beginning of this meeting, the incredible amount of work that this committee does on behalf of our committee. Thank you very much to Phil and your team. So that to further to deliberations of the selection panel, the Community and Protective Services Committee recommend Council approve the appointments of Wayne Antle, Adele Fury, and Mustafa Al-Humari to the Accessibility Advisory Committee. The term to be effective on April 13th, 2022 for the remainder of the 2018-2022 term of council. These are excellent, excellent candidates. I was part of the selection panel as well as Councillor El Shantiri. We're very pleased with the experience. Is this item carried?
Carried.
Carried? Excellent. Item number 10, the Accessibility Advisory Committee 2019-2020 annual report that the Accessibility Advisory Committee recommend that the Community and Protective Services Committee receive the 2019 to 2020 annual report of the Accessibility Advisory Committee as detailed in document 1. Is this item received?
Received.
Received. Thank you very much. We have no in-camera items. We've gone through the consent agenda. We have no notices of motion. Do we have any that anybody wishes to put on the floor at this time? Seeing none. Any inquiries? Seeing none. Oh, hold on. Sorry. Councillor Fleury.
I did submit an inquiry, Chair. I apologize.
You did indeed. I see that here. This has been shared in the Councillors SP and the shared drive. We have one inquiry regarding families in hotels and motels. If you'd like to read your inquiry, please go ahead, sir.
Thank you. According to Temporary Emergency Accommodation Dashboard in 2021, over 1,000 households stayed in temporary accommodation, family shelters, motels, hotels, with an average length of stay of 135 days. Many hotel and motel accommodations are not suitable for families, as many do not have access to food preparation areas, indoor, outdoor spaces for children, and privacy for families. This leaves many families in more vulnerable situations, sometimes leading to safety concerns. To ensure continual safety and supports of these families, can staff answer the following questions? What city supports for mental health and addictions, employment, child well-being are available to clients staying in hotels and motels? Please include supports available during regular business hours and after hours. So after hours and 24/7. 1, how are these accessed? And 2, how are issues with safety? I apologize here for the wording. I'll resubmit. But how are issues with safety monitored and proactively addressed with the city and motel operators and their staff?
Thank you very much for the inquiry. On adjournment, is this motion carried?
Carried.
Thank you, everyone, and especially to our guests at the beginning, members of the host nation and the Algonquin partners of the City of Ottawa. Thank you so much for joining us today on this great first step in our journey to implementing the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. The next meeting of CPS is scheduled for Thursday, April 21st, 2022, when hopefully the sun is shining and it's not quite as icy outside. It was lovely to have this discussion with all of you today. Thank you so much. Looking forward to seeing you in April. Bye now.